Hokage, Chronicle of the True Farewell. Hello again, dear adventurers of the multiverse. Thanks for joining us once more on this epic journey. Remember, this story is pure science fiction from our wild imagination, so don't go trying to summon dragons in your backyard. The rights of this amazing novel belong entirely to its original author, we are only the narrators. Do you want more adventures? Show some love to our YouTube channel with a subscription and a like, and if you want exclusive content, our Patreon is waiting for you with open arms. Chapter 251, Two-Handed. Illusionary magic turns the tide. Friends, have you ever seen an Ultraman in the ninja world? That day, Uchiha Chi saw one. The moment he lifted the sword of limits, 8 million guns, and slashed down with mighty force, an inexplicable sense of foreboding suddenly reverberated through Uchiha Chi's heart. A sudden chill rushed from the soles of his feet to his forehead, instantly calming his overheated mind. Uchiha Chi's expression hardened, and he suddenly looked up. The clouds in the sky had somehow gathered in a spiral, forming a thick, dense mass that looked like the face of a demon from hell, gazing down from above. Then, he unleashed a celestial roar, crack, a bolt of lightning pierced through the clouds, instantly spanning thousands of miles, carrying an old man with it as it hurtled down. In an inspiring gesture, one arm raised, 4 fingers pressed together, the other hand resting against his beating heart, it was like an Ultraman's arrival. Under Uchiha Chi's horrified gaze, the old man roared, and his 4 fingers, like knives, stabbed straight down. Hell thrust, 4-handed sword, along with this roar, balls of pitch-black lightning condensed at his fingertips and slammed into the flowing flame giant sword. Then, the sky full of thunder exploded, shooting out in a spider web shape. Layers of air were crushed and exploded. The heavy pressure instantly pressed down on Uchiha Chi along the sword body, making him groan and spit out a mouthful of blood. Cough, cough, puff, fuck, what's going on? Uchiha Chi's face turned grim, and he immediately twisted his waist and stomped his foot down heavily. The heavy, crushing kick sent the two-tailed head reeling, causing it to instinctively raise its head in anger. Uchiha Chi, the central link between the tailed beast's immense power and the flowing flame greatsword, relied on his absurd body to fortify himself, enduring the pain of his skin constantly cracking and bleeding, his bones creaking and piercing. He abruptly reversed the sword's downward momentum mid-air and slashed furiously toward the sky. Feeling the terrifying force emanating from the sword, a force that threatened to crush a man into pulp, the burly old man couldn't help but raise an eyebrow, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. This Uchiha boy's physical strength is so amazing, but he quickly suppressed his surprise, his fierce gaze returning to a calm expression. The next moment, the 4 fingers that had been continuously striking the greatsword quietly gathered 2 of them. With this movement, the black lightning that danced throughout the sky suddenly surged upward, becoming even thicker, more powerful, and more majestic. Zzz. Emitting from an extremely sharp point, black lightning, as thick as a tree branch, instantly expanded more than 10-fold, generating a terrifying penetrating force far beyond human limits. 2 fingers suddenly thrust forward. Snap! 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 A sharp explosion echoed, and dense cracks instantly appeared at the intersection of finger and sword. Then, boom, in a deafening explosion, the over 60-meter-long flowing flame sword was pierced from end to end by these 2 fingers of such disparate size. It transformed into a raging wildfire, shattering and crashing down. Then, the black lightning, undiminished in force, pierced the cliffs surrounding Hell Valley. In an instant, a massive wall of fire rose up, pushing away the endless smoke and dust, and expanding wildly outward in a ring. The brutal impact was so overwhelming that even the two-tailed beast couldn't stand, and was thrown to the ground. PFFT, knocked to the ground, Uchiha Chi immediately struggled to his feet, wiping the blood from his mouth. The shattered flowing flame sword instantly depleted him of 80% of his chakra. Combined with the ferocious recoil, his internal organs were dislocated, and he suffered internal bleeding and bruising. A normal person would have instantly lost their head and died with a thud. Fortunately, he possessed the forbidden technique of flesh transformation and immortality, allowing him to withstand this inhuman-only strong damage. He shook his head, shaking off a cloud of dust. Before Uchiha Chi could process what had happened, the premonition of danger sent chills up the back of his neck. He suddenly raised his head and gazed at the blazing wall of flames, veiled by smoke and dust. Here it comes, he raised his eyes, his scarlet Sharingan only detecting a fleeting leap, no, a rapidly approaching shadow. The figure swam within the curtain of sand and dust. Suddenly, from immense distance, it pierced the wall of fire, instantly blasting towards the back of his head. At that moment, the elbow strike, capable of completely blasting Uchiha-Chi's head, missed him by a fraction of a centimeter. At that moment, Uchiha-Chi's eyes flew open in fury, the veins around his eyes surging. Now, his scarlet Sharingan instantly transformed into a bewildering snake pupil. A seamless 360-degree field of vision expanded in an instant. He gathered the natural energy stored within his eyes, unleashing an indiscriminate eye technique upon everything within range. Senjutsu Sharingan, Waijiki no Kao, Jinjutsu Kaiten. Theoretically, Uchiha-Chi's eyes could simultaneously observe a 360-degree field of view. Jinjutsu Kaiten, as the name suggests, uses the indiscriminate Waijiki no Kao technique to cast an illusion on any living being with heat within a perfect 360-degree infrared field of view within a 5-meter radius. It requires an immense amount of natural energy to activate. This was Uchiha-Chi's own creation, a senjutsu illusion he was certain was impossible to evade. It was at that moment, relying on these enhanced eyes, that Uchiha-Chi finally grasped the attacker's full form, a figure with surging, explosive muscles. The wide, half-shoulder vest of the hidden cloud village wore on him like a tight-fitting vest. A thick, straw-colored rope laced his waist. His tousled white hair danced wildly from behind, resembling a demon. It was the man Uchiha-Chi had seen in the original novel, The Third Raikage, AI. Seeing such a terrifying thing actually appear before him, Uchiha-Chi's heart sank. It's true that the more you don't want to see something, the more it comes. Fortunately, however, this uniquely Uchiha-Chi, unstoppable illusionary eye technique had already been unleashed. Next, However, before Uchiha-Chi could finish imagining how he would replicate Naruto's victory over the Third Raikage, controlling the Third Raikage, who was under the illusion, to stab the old man to death with a hell thrust, one-handed hand, a gust of wind suddenly shot out from in front of him. A hazy image flashed before his eyes, an arm, its muscular lines like cast iron, a green thunder tattoo etched on its biceps, suddenly grasped his throat, then lifted him up like a chicken, pinning him to the ground and beating him furiously. Uchiha-Chi's heart suddenly rang with alarm, his heart pounding. He could see nothing, sense nothing. Even the blurry image was a premonition, a figment of his imagination. But at that moment, he subconsciously chose the right move, a sideways leap, followed by a tumbling awkwardly to the side. As he finished, he looked up, eyes widening in shock, his entire body trembling uncontrollably. A massive arm, identical to his premonition, suddenly tore through the wall of fire shrouded in black smoke. It actually reached out to the spot where Uchiha-Chi had been standing. Chapter 252 Fight Back. Ninja Technique Supersonic Vacuum Blade. Talent, Combat Intuition, S+, triggered. A line of text suddenly popped up before Uchiha-Chi, leaving him with a lingering sense of dread. In the past, this talent would rarely trigger during normal combat, only in the most critical moments, when both body and soul instinctively determined that the situation was almost certain to end. It was a form of feedback from his body. However, a vague feeling struck him that this wasn't the case. While his previous combat intuitions were incredible, they had never been able to foresee the future so clearly, or even to create such a perverse image before his eyes. At this moment, Uchiha-Chi had a vague understanding of what had just happened. Just after he had performed the illusion of heaven, the Sandame Raikage had acted like the Fourth Raikage, dodging the Amaterasu released by the main Gekkai Sharingan in the original story. Just as his illusion was about to reach the opponent, the Third Raikage, AI, dodged with incredible reflexes and speed, circling in a fraction of a second to arrive at his face and deliver a surprising grab. This speed surpassed the limits of human observation at close range. Even his second Magatama Sharingan was completely unable to discern his opponent's movements. Uchiha-Chi's heart sank at this thought. His previous assumption, based on the original text, that lightning release armor could evolve differently depending on its user, was now completely overturned. It wasn't that the Fourth Raikage's lightning release armor specialized in speed, while the Third's focused on defense. It was simply that the Third was stronger than the Fourth, having mastered the lightning release armor more thoroughly. That was all. Lightning release armor was lightning armor, it could greatly enhance defense and increase speed. The fundamentals were there, father and son were both learning the same technique. What distinguished the third and fourth generation's defensive power was the degree of training they'd acquired for their lightning armor, while their speed was their innate reflexes. The fourth's lightning armor allowed him to dodge Jalugo's mouth cannon in 0 frames, naturally allowing him to perform a second-tier dodging eye technique. Uchiha Chi now faced the third Hokage, who was also capable of dodging eye techniques. His reflexes might not be as fast as the fourth's, but they weren't far behind. Even more troubling, Uchiha Chi couldn't help but glance at the sizzling layer of lightning on his opponent's body. At that moment, the third Hokage narrowed his eyes slightly, looking at his grasping hand. These reflexes are almost like precognition. In this respect, this kid might even be better than AI. However, the third AI turned his head, glancing coldly at Uchiha Chi, who had tumbled to the side in a panic, his hand propped up on the ground with 5 fingers spread out. Still too weak, the whispered words had barely escaped before they expanded. In a flash of lightning, the third Hokage vanished from the scene. Gone, Uchiha Chi's heart tightened at the sight of this scene. His crimson, snake-like pupils darted left and right, casting a few faintly trembling red lines through the night. Where will that guy attack from? Even with his transformed, snake-shaped Sharingan, his observation abilities enhanced, he still struggled to grasp the enemy's form through his sight. This situation suddenly reminded Uchiha Chi of the time when he faced Kakuzu with only his own Magatama. His eyes weren't enough. So, Uchiha Chi simply closed his eyes. He immersed himself in his body's awareness, using the sense of danger that surged through his body, as if he were in the center of a calm pond, observing the ripples created by the waves crashing against him to determine the enemy's position. Gradually, silence settled in his ears. Wildfires crackled and scorched the earth, the evening breeze drifted quietly through the night sky, and the tense breathing of the ninjas on both sides outside the circle of fire grew increasingly frantic. And then, an imperceptible electric current flashed, a crackling sound like paper scraping against paper. A moment before hearing this sound, a chill ran down his spine. Uchiha Chi opened his eyes abruptly, and without hesitation, he twisted the ground with one hand and somersaulted into midair. The next moment, a sharp flash of lightning suddenly ignited beneath him. Staring intently at the figure that passed by and struck down with a single kick, Uchiha Chi's eyes froze, and he immediately clasped his hands together in midair. Secret technique, Earth's Wrath, swish, swish, swish. The ground was suddenly pierced by 3 jet-black objects, composed of densely woven strands of silk, which then gathered into pitch-black tentacles. Dense, countless tentacles of the Earth Resentment U burst through the surface, surging wildly and entwining themselves with the third Hokage. This was the Earth Resentment U. Hiding their lives beneath the battlefield, these dark tentacles were lurking, ready to strike. Uchiha Chi had pressed his palm against the ground, refusing to rise, precisely to create a trap to restrict his opponent's movement. The third Hokage frowned slightly, his kick aimed at Uchiha Chi's back missing. Just as he was about to twist his foot to redirect his momentum and continue pursuing Uchiha Chi, the path he had to take was already filled with these sturdy, dark tentacles. To capture Uchiha Chi, he had to sever them first. Seeing this, he didn't hesitate, instantly activating his lightning armor, his entire body pulsing with lightning. With his thumbs pinched, the 4-handed knuckles transformed into a hand blade, slashing out, instantly tearing through the 3 dark tentacles like a hot knife through butter. However, 3 incomprehensible symbols suddenly lit up from the severed tentacles section. Then, Uchiha Chi, rising midair and pressing down with one palm, saw an identical symbol appear on his palm. Sealing technique, triple seal, green beams emanated from the symbols, connecting with the others in threes, instantly forming a triangular green cage that trapped AI Sande. Then, the green triangle began to shrink and squeeze towards the center. AI Sande tilted his head slightly, catching a glimpse of the scene and shaking his head. These little tricks won't work on me. As he finished speaking, lightning flashed again. The triple seal was like a toy before AI Sande. He didn't even need to use the 4 penetration techniques to sever the Earth Grudge's tentacles. With just his lightning release armor, he shrugged and shattered the sealing technique with a powerful impact. However, Uchiha Chi didn't reply. His gaze darkened, and he spun sideways, leaping down. He pursed his lips, then turned his feet, gripping the Kusanagi sword, already charged, and charged at the third AI. The earthly resentment thread and the 3-sided seal were merely designed to restrict the third AI's movements, allowing him the opportunity to approach and attack, rather than letting the opponent seize the initiative and use his lightning release's extreme speed to move at will. The initiative in battle, though only 5 words, had a profound impact on the outcome. These 5 words had been the core principle of Uchiha Chi's battle planning to this day. At this moment, the Kusanagi sword in Uchiha Chi's hand trembled slightly, but no stream of flames or swirling water blades emanated as before. It seemed as if he had run out of tricks, relying only on the inherent sharpness of this divine weapon to wreak havoc. However, only Uchiha Chi knew that the sword contained the product of compressed wind and lightning chakra, merging into perfect harmony. This trembling blade concealed the sharpness of the wind, and the high-frequency vibrations amplified the sharpness of the invisible wind blade. Because the vibration frequency exceeded the limit of human hearing, it was inaudible, concealing the sword's murderous intent. This was the ultimate move Uchiha Chi had prepared for the third Raikage, the composite ninjutsu, supersonic shock vacuum blade. Chapter 253, Intelligence is Life. Silent Murder. Clutching the supersonic vacuum wind blade, Uchiha Chi's eyes flashed crimson as he lunged forward with a single step. His opponent was the Raikage, a man with formidable defenses. Therefore, he didn't resort to throwing ninja tools as he often did, creating an opening. As the third AI had said, such tricks were useless against him. Neither silk thread nor ninja tools, nor even massive but dispersed ninjutsu like the flowing flame greatsword, could pierce this veneer of flesh. In an age where almost all ninjas are glass cannons, the Raikage's lightning release armor was a true anomaly. Therefore, past experience with other ninjas was ineffective. To pierce this lightning armor, Uchiha Chi had 2 options. One was to wield his blazing white longsword, concentrated with fire attribute chakra to the extreme. At close range, he would attempt to forcibly cut through the lightning armor with a heat so intense it could melt everything. This method required a vast amount of chakra. The second option was to rely on attribute restraint, using this wind and thunder combined ninjutsu, with its ultimate point-killing and penetrating power, to pierce the lightning release armor. This wasn't a choice. So, Uchiha Chi chose, I want it all. In this rapid sprint, a sharp wind whipping across his face, everything around him began to dissolve into lines, forgotten in the moment. Uchiha Chi roared, instantly biting down the sparks that escaped from between his teeth. Fire release, chakra mode, activated. In the next instant, a fierce, incandescent light blazed. A huge sun rose from the cliffs. A raging flame, igniting the heart, igniting everything in this body, surged upward. In an instant, it concentrated, gathered, converged, and united, wrapping around his left arm and left fist like a dragon sucking water. Instantly, Uchiha Chi swung a fist as radiant as the sun, furiously smashing into the third-generation AI's face. It was the same blade-breaking flame fist he'd used to defend against Hazuki Mainjutsu's Hirame's lightning blade. Amidst this intense white light, almost rivaling the lightning illusion jutsu's lightning pillar, AI the third couldn't help but narrow his eyes, a solemn expression rising in his gaze. Tisk, I can't see where this bread is, so, the initial series of techniques and its sword in his hand were actually feints. After closing in, he used the intense light to distract his line of sight, and then used this attack to achieve victory. Is this the ultimate fire release technique mentioned in the intelligence? The one that can be performed without hand seals? Thinking of this, AI couldn't help but curl his lips slightly. For the first time, the Uchiha brat, who he had ignored and only wanted to end the battle quickly, felt a hint of fighting spirit. If that's the case, AI, who had been standing there carelessly, completely oblivious to Uchiha Chi, straightened his stance slightly. His eyes suddenly grew cold. I will defeat you as quickly as possible. Then, AI raised both hands, clenching his left fist in front of his right. With his right, he clenched his thumb and raised 4 fingers. After a moment's thought, he retracted 2 fingers, leaving his index and middle fingers pointed sword-like. With this movement, AI's lightning armor quietly shone even brighter. And this, surprisingly, was Hell Thrust, Nihonkind. After completing this move, AI closed his eyes and focused his attention on his ears, listening to the rustling of the wind. Unlike Uchiha Chi, who relied on intuition to dodge, AI, a skilled taijutsu ninja, possessed immense experience in close combat. He could even determine the location of his opponent's attacks simply by the sound of the wind. Listening to the direction of the wind around him, scorched by the flames, he suddenly turned his head to the right. He immediately locked onto the figure that shifted position and pierced through the clouds like a flash of mist. Over here, AI's eyes snapped open, glaring fiercely. With his waist and horse in unison, he pulled back his left elbow, twisted his body, and swung out his right-hand blade. With a twist of his body, He thrust forward with a powerful right thrust. As if it had been positioned a step ahead of time, this powerful hand blade aimed directly at the chest of the throbbing, punching, and leaping youth. It was as if Uchiha Chi had run into him himself. At this moment, Uchiha Chi, who was swinging his fist towards AI's face, was startled. However, he was in midair, and using fire-style chakra mode to launch a flaming fist, which meant he couldn't use the sun dance to dodge through the air. He had no way to avoid this hand blade. In an instant, lightning bolts burst out, piercing skin, slicing flesh, and crushing ribs. Then, he aimed at the vibrant, beating heart of fire and suddenly stabbed it. Puff! After crushing the heart, the hand knife pierced through his chest, penetrating his vest. Uchiha Chi stared at the hand knife that had pierced his chest. The flaming fist he swung missed AI's face by a mere centimeter. Then, the blazing white flames wrapped around his arm and fist drifted into the air like a rootless wildfire. The flow of fire-style chakra mode is the heart, the source of this violent power. Once the heart is destroyed, the power generated by the burning heart will naturally dissipate like wildfire. At that moment, AI raised his massive arm, piercing Uchiha Chi's chest and lifting him into the air. "That's enough, brat." He then looked indifferently at Uchiha Chi, whose left arm drooped limply, and said coldly, "A ninja's information is his life. After leaking so much information, you still dare to stay in Hell Valley instead of training and strengthening in the village. Honestly, this is simply arrogant and insolent, and it seems stupid." As the words fell, AI's eyes flashed with coldness. Information about Uchiha Chi had been spread throughout the ninja world by the Tsunagakure legend. He knew that a wound like piercing the heart wouldn't kill the brat, but it would neutralize his offensive methods, making him a prey on the chopping block. The next moment, AI raised his left hand, fingers splayed, and suddenly grasped Uchiha Chi's head, intending to rip the young man's head from his neck and take it away. However, faced with this life-or-death situation, Uchiha Chi was only briefly surprised before regaining his composure. While this situation was unexpected, it didn't affect his original plan. With this thought in mind, Uchiha Chi suddenly raised his head and stared intently at AI's chest. At such close range, the lightning-like scar on his chest was clearly visible. The third Hokage's words were absolutely correct. For a ninja, information is life. Coincidentally, while AI knew Uchiha Chi's information, Uchiha Chi also knew the opponent's fatal weakness, information AI didn't know. A tangle of thoughts flashed through his mind. A palm wind from the third AI lifted the hair from his forehead. Under the other's cold gaze, Uchiha Chi suddenly curled his lips into a fierce smile. Then, he quietly raised the sword, which AI had seen as a feint, and aimed it at the lightning scar on AI's chest. The next moment, thunder roared, accompanied by a violent wind. The Kusanagi sword suddenly shone brightly, emitting a golden light like a curry stick. The endless murderous intent hidden beneath the ordinary appearance of the sword suddenly erupted. Chapter 254, A Sudden Change. A thunderous blow. Swish. Shedding their ordinary, wind blades suddenly surged forth. Squeak, 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 accompanied by the sudden surge of wind blades, the long-suppressed thunder resounded with a piercing shriek like 1,000 birds singing together. Hiss, what is this? AI couldn't help but frown, a look of pain suddenly appearing on his face. The sharp, vibrating thunder, at the limit of human hearing, instantly pierced their eardrums, and blood flowed down their ears and jaws. The thunder amplified the wind's force, making it sharper. And the wind amplified the thunder's force, causing its wailing to resonate throughout the world. This was a sonic attack that even AI's lightning release armor could not resist. This was the power of the so-called combined ninjutsu. At this moment, Uchiha Chi didn't care whether this move would make it impossible to distinguish between friend and foe, and even risk becoming deaf together to temporarily destroy AI's hearing. AI, the third Hokage with vast experience in physical combat, was simply too powerful. Uchiha Chi once suspected that if his opponent had a panel, would he be able to display all his superb physical skills at once? Therefore, all he could do was to pull his opponent to the same level as himself. If we are to be blind, we will be blind together. If we are to be deaf, we will be deaf together. We cannot favor one over the other. Then, without any hesitation, Uchiha Chi shot the golden sword light towards the scar on AI's left chest. Seeing this, AI's eyes suddenly fixed. How is it possible? How could this kid know the information about this weakness? Did he guess it? The information can never be leaked. After all, Dode, who knew this weakness, has died at the hands of Uchiha Setsuna, And this kid actually made such a life-threatening decision based on just one side. Such a crazy behavior immediately reminded AI of the powerful man who was killed by him 10 years ago. A sudden sense of danger also made his entire body tense up. He instinctively retracted his left hand from its grip on Uchiha Chi's forehead. In a moment of desperate urgency, he pulled his elbow back, opened his palm, and before the golden sword light could pierce through the scar on his left chest and his heart, he placed it just before the scar on his left chest. With a swish, the golden sword light pierced a rising lightning release armor on the back of AI's left hand. Zizzy. But by then, Uchiha Chi was already feeling the immense resistance that made his thrusts difficult. The third Hokage AI, at this critical moment, actually clamped his wind blade with the muscles of his palm. The opponent's body, beneath his lightning release armor, was surprisingly tough beyond a human form, giving him the sensation of striking diamond. Uchiha Chi narrowed his eyes slightly. While he could still attempt to push forward again, turning this attack into a decisive blow, the Kusanagi sword's inherent sharpness could easily have severed the opponent's arm at this point. He decisively abandoned the idea. It was simply that the thought of continuing was accompanied by a subconscious, chilling premonition of danger. Sasuke's Chidori thrusts, unleashed from his palm, could have sliced through the fourth Hokage AI's lightning armor, but he simply couldn't push forward. Now, although Uchiha Chi was facing the third-generation AI, whose defenses were even stronger than the fourth-generation AI's, Uchiha Chi anticipated that the supersonic shock vacuum blade, with its attribute restraint and compound ninjutsu amplification, would be able to achieve similar results against the third-generation Hokage's Sasuke. This was a simple calculation. And now that the results had been verified, there was no need for him to keep targeting the third-generation Hokage's weak spot on the chest and stab his heart. The third-generation Hokage, without the impure world body, had more than just a single weak spot on the chest. He could target the throat, carotid artery, brain, upper abdomen, stomach, liver, spleen, crotch, knee joints, and arches of the feet, all of which would be paralyzed by a single strike in a human body. He had plenty of opportunities. As soon as he thought of this, Uchiha Chi's eyes turned cold, and he immediately raised his foot and kicked AI's thunder armor. Relying on the recoil of the kick, he pulled his bloody and hollow chest out of AI's right arm, and fell to the ground backwards without any delay. Uchiha Chi then bent down with a bow stance, twisted his feet in a circle, took out a kunai from the ninja tool bag at his waist and shot it out. With one hand, he grabbed the silk thread that rebounded from the end of the kunai, and water splashed up from the soles of his feet. He slid through AI's crotch with a water escape technique of water cutting, and went through his back. He stood upside down with a powerful waist strength, then twisted and pushed the ground with his 5 fingers, and jumped with one arm, turning 360 degrees in the air, and the blade light lit up. Grasping the hilt of the Kusanagi sword with both hands, he twisted it. "Go to hell, you old dog in a tortoise's shell," Uchiha Chi roared, then, gripping the sharp golden sword in reverse, slashed straight at AI's crown. The golden blade reflected AI's face, which looked up in shock. The next moment, the old man, who couldn't hear what Uchiha Chi said, but was certain it wasn't a kind word, suddenly became furious. The brat's moves were full of deception, making him extremely frustrated. To put it simply, it was like fighting a cunning flea, a buzzing mosquito, or a scattering fly. His immense experience was useless, leaving him feeling like he'd eaten shit. For a moment, AI's blood pressure was rising. He had had enough. "Kid, you've pissed me off." Bang! Bang! AI suddenly twisted around and stomped his feet hard, sending up a cloud of dust. He clenched his blood-stained left palm, his beard and hair unfurling, his eyes raised in anger, and he roared fiercely, "Right now, I'm going to kill you." Similarly, Uchiha Chi, oblivious to the old man's ramblings, suddenly felt a surge of chakra absorbed and transformed from his tail in his abdomen, replenishing the chakra lost from the blow to his flame sword and flame fist. Then, he saw the old man's face scowl. He turned around and didn't move at all, even tilting his head back and glaring at him with his huge eyes. The scene was comical, and Uchiha Chi couldn't help but laugh. "What's the matter? You old man, are you really going to block my sword with your teeth?" And it was like he was offering his head for a stab. Seeing this, Uchiha Chi's eyes lit up. Without hesitation, he gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, his arms and even his forehead throbbing with such force that veins popped out. Then, he thrust his sword down with all his might. However, looking up at the golden sword light, its sharp aura capable of shattering earth and stone into dust, AI only coldly forced out a few words, strongest, lightning release armor. The moment these chilling words fell, the dark, thick clouds above the sky, spiraling together, suddenly brightened. Crack, a winding, bright bolt of lightning pierced through the dark clouds, connecting with the third Hokage AI above the cliff. As the thunder fell rapidly, AI's lightning armor instantly exploded, deforming and rapidly expanding. Then, bathed in the thunder, AI's white hair, which had been cascading down his back, suddenly stood up. Fierce lightning flashed everywhere, charring the surrounding ground. Even Uchiha Chi, who had already landed on AI's head, felt a strong numbness. A brief moment later, the golden sword in his hand pierced the erupting lightning armor. For a moment, Uchiha Chi felt as if the sword had pierced a thick piece of diamond. Although he could press into it inch by inch with the help of his ninjutsu, the speed of the old man before him was like a chasm, blocking Uchiha Chi's possibility of victory. Watching the sudden change in the scene before him, transforming him into a Super Saiyan-like old man, Uchiha Chi's expression twisted. He wondered if he had walked into the wrong set, his eyes gradually turning into a look of fear. Holy crap! This thing has a second stage? An extremely intense premonition of danger suddenly exploded in his heart. However, before the premonition could even materialize, it surpassed Uchiha Chi's combat intuition and foresight. A pair of thick arms wrapped in violent thunder appeared before his eyes like a flash of lightning, and then disappeared from his side in an instant. Then, Uchiha Chi felt his waist being hugged and his pants being lifted up. The force of a bull lifted him up high, making him feel as if he was seeing the set 18 years ago where his father had lifted him up and thrown him miserably. Oh, this damn carousel had even appeared. His vision suddenly spun and swayed, and then, all he could see was dirt. Chapter 255, Hell Thrust. The 60-meter-long flaming sword was shattered, the two tails was struck down, and the sky roared with thunder again. The battle that had repeatedly brought Uchiha Chi to the brink of death actually lasted less than 2 minutes. At this moment, the Konoha and Uchiha ninjas, relying on the number 11 bus for their journey, were already one step behind Uchiha Chi due to the difference in their mounts. They had barely eked out a sandstorm and sea of fire unleashed by the clash of Hell Thrust, Nihon Kant and the might of 8 million guns, only to be nearly deafened by a continuous, sharp rumble of thunder. Then, thunder from the sky unleashed a new storm. In a world where such immense power is concentrated, ordinary ninjas, caught in a battlefield with such a vastly different power structure, must fight tooth and nail to withstand even the aftermath of a single powerful clash. When the group led by Uchiha Setsuna and Sarutobi Shinosuke finally overcame numerous obstacles and arrived at the battlefield, they were horrified to see the battleground had been completely shattered into a charred heap of ruins. Standing in the center of the battlefield, like a victorious boxing champion, was none other than the elder known as the Third Hokage. His body was swirled with beams of lightning emitting an extremely terrifying aura. As the lightning swept through him, even the air around him vibrated and hummed. Upon seeing this figure, the Konoha ninjas, sensing the elder's powerful aura alone, gasped fiercely, then slowly turned their gaze to the figure held high by the Hokage. That's Uchiha Chi. Seeing this, the Konoha ninjas paled and trembled. The one who had rushed through danger, who had run in moments of despair, who had just saved them once before the camp, who had even single-handedly overpowered two-tailed beast Jinchuriki, who had made them feel victory was imminent, Konoha's ace, Konoha's second-tailed beast Jinchuriki, the genius Chunin named Uchiha Chi. Now, he had actually lost. The young man was captured by the Sandame Hokage and lifted high. His body was stained with blood, his clothes torn, and his exposed skin was covered in electric shock and burn marks. His left arm was black, like charred charcoal. And on his left chest, where his heart should have been beating, was a gaping hole pierced from front to back. The scene was horrifying. Seeing this, Uchiha Setsuna's eyes were bloodshot. The pupil in his single crimson eye shrank to a pinprick, and the three Magadamas whirling around it spun madly, connecting into line. It was as if it were about to transform into a completely new pattern. But, why? Uchiha Setsuna couldn't help but clench his fists tightly, his whole body trembling. He had forgotten. Knowing he had opened the forbidden eye, yet he had forgotten how to use it. How could such a joke exist in the world? And why at this juncture? Before anyone could react, on the field, a thunder bomb, the old man's face turned grim, and with a roar, his muscles bulged. He embraced Uchiha Chi and slammed him to the ground. With a cry of "come on, duck neck," boom! Uchiha Chi was instantly smashed into the ground like a toy. Furious thunder swept out like an electric chain, slashing down like a heavy battle axe. With Uchiha Chi as the center, the ground instantly shattered, cracked, and lifted in a circle. Spiderweb-like cracks stretched across 100 meters to the feet of the Konoha group. Under everyone's horrified gaze, the young man's head struck the ground first, instantly twisting his neck into V shape. His spine pierced his skin and instantly slammed into the ground, shattering piece by piece. Then came his arms, sternum, hips, legs, and feet. Killer Bee, slumped on the edge of the cliff behind the wreckage, watching the scene, couldn't help but exclaim with some excitement, "The third Hokage actually used this move. So far, no one has survived this move. That Uchiha brat is finished." However, at this moment, 3 shuriken, shrouded in flames, blazed up from the night sky in a dazzling arc. In an instant, they were approaching the third Hokage. AI glanced sideways, raising an eyebrow. "Shuriken jutsu? It's useless against me." Just as he was about to raise his hand to swat the shuriken away like flies, clang, clang, clang. 3 shurikens collided in midair, deflecting just as the third Hokage struck them, then whizzed past him. "Ninjutsu, Phoenix Fire Dance Jutsu." Uchiha Setsuna's face darkened, and his hands rapidly formed the seals of the Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu, following it with a Tiger Seal. This Shuriken Shadow Clone Jutsu, inherited from the third Hokage Sarutobi Hiruzen, was passed down to Uchiha Setsuna by Uchiha Chi after their recent combat training. He explained that since the third Hokage hadn't instructed on whether it could be taught to others, he simply shared it for the benefit of the Uchiha clan, adding to the clan's ninjutsu arsenal. Uchiha Setsuna, already highly proficient in both Shuriken and Shadow Clone techniques, quickly refined it to make it more suitable for the Uchiha clan, thus developing the Phoenix Fire Dance Jutsu. This technique, originally intended to be taught to Uchiha Chi today, unexpectedly came in handy at this crucial moment. Instantly, the 3 shurikens that had passed over the third Hokage split in 2, then in 4, then in 8, until the entire night sky was ablaze. Soon, the shurikens, blazing with flames, enveloped the entire sky as they spun furiously. And in an instant, it transformed into a rain of fire, tracing unpredictable arcs as they shot towards the third Hokage's back. "Is this guy targeting B?" The third Hokage I frowned slightly, about to intervene, but then, as if remembering something, he snorted coldly, "You underestimate B. This technique won't threaten him." However, just as he turned his head to look in Killer Bee's direction, watching as Killer Bee used partial-tailed Bee's transformation to summon an 8-tailed tentacle to wrap around himself, blocking the cascading Hausen Fire Shuriken, 2 kunai, hidden in the darkness, silently pierced him, entangling Uchiha Chi, who lay smeared in a puddle of mud on the ground, his life or death unknown. Then, Uchiha Setsuna took a deep breath, raised his index fingers and thumbs, crossed them, and pulled back. The silk thread at the end of the kunai instantly straightened, and pulled back. The silk thread bound Uchiha Chi, hauling him into the air and sending him hurtling back towards the Konoha ninja camp at high speed. This old man actually wanted to snatch someone from the third Hokage. Seeing this, AI's forehead twitched slightly, veins bulging. Another diversionary tactic, these Uchiha? His eyes suddenly fierce, a cruel expression on his face. Although the long-distance teleportation technique hadn't caused him fatal damage, it had damaged his body, preventing him from immediately killing the Uchiha brat with a hell thrust, one-handed hand. This was the reason why Uchiha Chi escaped death and was not killed by Chujin. It was also because of this that the battle had dragged on to this point. Already irritable, he had completely had enough of these Uchiha's insidious tactics. Just in time, my body's almost recovered. AI glanced coldly at the Konoha ninjas and took a deep breath. Then use this technique, take care of all of you. At that moment, the air grew increasingly scorching. The wailing night wind lingered mournfully in the air, dark clouds swirled, and from time to time, flashes of pale lightning flashed across the sky. AI, the third Hokage, looked icy cold. At this moment, he raised his hand and pointed it directly at the Konoha camp. His gaze fixed on Uchiha Chi, who was being pulled backwards in midair. He passed through the young man and aimed at the white-haired, one-eyed old man manipulating the silk thread. Crack, with a roar of thunder, he raised a finger. A flood of lightning converged on the tip of his index finger, instantly transforming into a ray of light even brighter than the thunder in the sky, the legendary, strongest spear, of ninja legend. Hell Thrust, One-Handed Punch. Chapter 256, Hell is revealed, and all kinds of desperate situations are revealed. Seeing the third Raikage strike this pose, Sarutobi Shinosuke of Konoha felt a sudden pang of relief. A chill shot from the soles of his feet to his forehead, his heart nearly leaping out of his throat. That move is the third Raikage's signature technique, a finger lightning spear capable of piercing everything into hell, piercing through heaven and earth. The ninja present were no strangers to this technique. Upon hearing Sarutobi Shinosuke's description of this technique, they instantly recognized it. Hiss, cold sweat broke out on their foreheads as they nervously watched AI's movements. The third Raikage's fame, besides his lightning armor, known as the strongest shield, rested on this technique, known as the strongest spear. Possessing both the strongest spear and the strongest shield, he could ignore all attacks and charge directly into enemy territory, decapitating enemies from a distance with one man against 1,000. The power of this technique increased dramatically as the number of fingers he possessed decreased. The entire ninja world knew his intelligence, yet few could do anything to him. This was the true terror of the third Raikage. Just now, Hisashi seemed to have said that to shatter C's giant sword, the third Raikage seemed to have only used the Nihon-kan technique, and now, he's using just one finger. Are we fighting a war? 2 fingers pierced through a 60-meter giant sword, and now a single finger would poke everyone out like a candied hose stick. Who among them could withstand such a move? The Konoha ninjas gasped, their faces turning pale. The weaker Inuzuka Jab and Hyuga Kenji were even startled like frightened birds by the old man's movements. At this point, the only ones who could manage to maintain composure were the more experienced Sarutobi Shinosuke, Hyuga Hisashi, Aburame Ryoma, and Uchiha Setsuna. Incidentally, because Mizuno Yuki had died in the previous Kumagakure raid, 2 members of Aburame Shigero's team had been incorporated into the other 2 teams. Use whatever ninjutsu you have, otherwise, we'll all die here. This is no joke. Aburame Ryoma surveyed the situation with a grim expression, then turned to his cousin Aburame Shigero and said, "Shigero, I'll defend. You try to use the nano-poisonous insects. The only solution I can think of is, he would use the secret technique, Insect Swamp, to conceal the situation. Then, Aburame Shigero would use the Aburame family's most powerful nano-poisonous insects, the secret technique, Poison Dust. Anyone caught in the attack would almost certainly die." However, Aburame Shigero shook his head, his face slightly pale as he interrupted, "We've tried it, but the nano-poisonous bugs were all electrocuted by that lightning armor before they could even get close. Our only chance is to use Uchiha Chi's single-target wind ninjutsu to inject the bugs, but against a battlefield between Uchiha Chi and the third Raikage, my bugs simply can't survive." As one of the most perceptive ninjas on the team, he, Aburame Ryoma, and the 2 Hyuga clan members had seen more than anyone else and had tried more. At this moment, Aburame Shigero reluctantly stated the truth. Putting aside the fact that the third Raikage's lightning armor could kill the nano-poisonous bugs, just Uchiha Chi's teammate, with his every move, was incredibly powerful. Ninjutsu of the 4 attributes of wind, fire, thunder, and water flew across the battlefield. The intense heat of his flame fists, the sonic attacks of his lightning ninjutsu, and the raging wind blades, at one point, prevented his bugs from even getting close. Besides, the only one capable of piercing the lightning armor, Uchiha Chi, had already been beaten into pulp. Even if Aburame Shigero wanted to cooperate, he couldn't. Hearing this, Sarutobi Shinosuke gritted his teeth. As the team's strongest wind-style ninja, he clenched his chakra metal blade, Hiyori, and asked Hinata Hisashi, who stood beside him, observing the situation with a serious expression, "Hisashi, if I use Hiyori to perform wind-style Shinichimanji, can I break through that lightning armor?" "Create a chance." Hinata Hisashi turned with a strange expression, glancing at Sarutobi Shinosuke with a peculiar look, and finally shook his head helplessly. "Can it be broken? Don't you have any idea, are your wind-style and taijutsu stronger than Uchiha Chi's? Or can your humble chakra metal blade be sharper than the sacred Kusanagi sword?" A single, powerful wind-style attack could indeed have some effect against the strongest lightning-style armor, but only if the third Raikage stood still. Even Uchiha Chi first limited the third Raikage's space to dodge before doing so. The reason the third Raikage was unstoppable was because he actually moved. Moreover, he moved faster than anyone else. He could dodge most threatening ninjutsu. Wind style, Shinichimanji, requiring a ninja wielding an Iori to approach the enemy and then generate two high-speed, high-powered chakra blades to launch an attack, did have a slim chance of breaking the lightning-style armor. However, if you, Sarutobi Shinosuke, approached, you'd likely be stabbed to death before you even unleashed your blades. Looking at this, these elite Konoha jonin seemed so powerless before the third Raikage. But reality was harsh. A group of Konoha ninjas and elite Uchiha clan warriors, capable of capturing Kakuzu, a cage-level expert, were as weak as chickens before the Sandaime Raikage. It simply goes to show that even among cage-level warriors, there's a gap. For a moment, the atmosphere was oppressive and heavy, even the air around them seemed unbearable. Everyone's eyes were tensely fixed on the old man who began to slowly walk. One step, two. Faster and faster. In an instant, he transformed into an unparalleled bolt of lightning, crashing down at breakneck speed. Each heavy step seemed to stamp on everyone's heart, shaking their hearts. Fortunately, at this moment, Fire Style, Great Fire Slayer Arrow, X5. Under Uchiha Setsuna's command, the 5 Uchiha who followed him stepped forward, their hands already forming hand seals, Zijoshu Wushin Haiyin. He took a deep breath, gathering chakra in his throat, causing his chest to swell and his body to lean back. Then, with a raised index finger, he unleashed 5 flaming arrows like massive crossbow bolts, stirring up a gust of wind as they thundered towards the third Raikage. Unlike the original Uchiha Madara technique, which unleashed arrows of infernal fire like falling meteorites, the effect of this technique, as its name suggests, was to form these massive crossbow-like flaming arrows, thus completing the transformation of the technique, greatly increasing its penetrating power and velocity. Now, he aimed at the lightning spear charging at him at breakneck speed. Powerful enough to pierce through the heavens and earth. 5 arrows were unleashed in rapid succession. Uchiha Setsuna's face was solemn, his Sharingan fixed fixedly on the charging third Raikage. Unlike the jutsu he commanded the other Uchiha to use, which spread upon contact and dealt wide area damage, Uchiha Setsuna, having awakened his main Gekkai of Sharingan and enhanced his vision, could see the Raikage's movements with uncanny clarity. So, he bided his time. Furthermore, Uchiha Setsuna glanced at Uchiha Si-chan, who was rapidly flying towards him, his expression grave. If it were you, you wouldn't be defeated so easily. After all, you've created countless miracles along the way. A hint of affection crept into his gaze, as if, through the perilous present, he could see this scene just a few months ago when he had led this foolish boy out of the village. He saw the boy he hadn't given any hope in, yet who had pulled off an impossible comeback and ultimately turned the tide. Uchiha Setsuna took a deep breath and formed hand seals with his hands. The tense expression on his face was as if he was praying, and the wrinkles on his face were stretched like ropes stretched tight at both ends. Then, he opened his eyes wide, and the 3 black magatama in his single scarlet eye spun rapidly. If you are not dead, then let this old man see it once more, Uchiha see. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 257 I spit out snakes, the snakes spit out me, I spit out swords. Through my hands and chest. 5 flaming arrows, like powerful bolts from a massive crossbow, were fired one after another. Swish. The wind blew loudly, sending the old man's long, backward hair dancing wildly amidst the thunder. At a critical juncture, the flaming arrows and the lightning were almost about to collide. The ferocious figure leaped from the ground, one hand pointing to the sky, the other behind his back, and flipped sideways. The flaming arrows streaked past him, blasting out, flying, and hitting the ground with a roar. Pong, a sea of flaming flames stretched back across the shattered rocky landscape. In an instant, the earth trembled, and gravel flew. Yet, the thunder, even faster than before, crushed down with a terrifying force. Amidst the thunder, AI briefly glanced at the exploding flaming arrows behind him. After briefly assessing their power, a flicker of contempt rose in his eyes. The next moment, he rolled onto the ground, took a step forward, and leaned down like an indestructible lightning spear. Facing the remaining 4 flaming arrows, he didn't dodge or evade, but met them head-on with a single finger. Stepping forward, charging. Swish. His powerful stance unleashed an unparalleled blast of wind. At that moment, The flaming arrows and the fingertip gleaming with pale lightning collided like a needle against a thorn. Boom! The powerful flaming arrows were instantly pierced by that finger, forming a straight line that transformed into 4 fiery red beams that shot backwards. Instantly, a sea of fire erupted into the sky, enveloping all directions. Now, Uchiha Setsuna's eyes flashed with cold light, his expression etched into a ferocious expression. He brought his left index and middle fingers together, forming the tiger seal. Fire style, great fire extinguishing, his aged body leaned back, and he unleashed nearly all of the chakra he had been accumulating in his mouth, unleashing it in an endless sea of fire. This chakra reserve, amplified by the activation of his main Gekyo Sharingan, was nearly as powerful as a ninjutsu transformed by Chitanla. The sea of fire it transformed into. It charged out like a wild dog, fanning out in a fan-like pattern, its end nearly 100 meters wide. In an instant, it engulfed everything in sight. At the same time, Uchiha Setsuna's eyes darkened, and he spread his right hand's 5 fingers wide, swinging his arm back and reversing the direction of the silk thread. He flung the still-breathing Uchiha Chi bound at the end straight towards the third Raikage, drowning, crushing, and consuming everything in a sea of flames. A fierce old man, shrouded in lightning, tore through everything before him with a brutal gesture, advancing unfazed. The only thing that affected him was the blazing sea of fire that obscured his vision. Thinking of using this jutsu to conceal your tracks and retreat, AI's eyes suddenly turned cold. But it didn't matter. He had memorized the Konoha position and was confident that with his speed, he could tear through the sea of flames before the enemy was out of sight. However, at that moment, a dark figure was suddenly swung towards AI. It was Uchiha Chi, who had been rescued by Uchiha Setsuna after taking a thunder bomb. Seeing this, AI was stunned. He had been rescued, but why didn't he take him away? Why did he throw this brat over again? Isn't this your clan's young leader? Yet, at this moment, Uchiha Chi, practically smashed into a puddle of mud. His neck snapped in half, seemingly beyond dead, suddenly opened his scarlet, snake-like eyes. He was still alive. And, well done. Great Elder. A sinister grin crossed Uchiha Chi's face as he addressed the suddenly appearing third Raikage AI. Then, he opened his mouth. A thick, sturdy white snake instantly vomited out from the battered, mangled remains. The white-scaled serpent lunged out, latching onto AI, who was swiftly passing by. Its body, charred black by the lightning armor, remained tightly wrapped around AI's chest. The scene was like third brother riding a train, swept by the surging wind and the speed that transformed everything around him into an indistinct line. The white snake was third brother, and AI was the train. Is this Orochimaru's technique? Never having imagined someone would dare to hitchhike on the hell spike, and in such a bizarre manner, AI was startled, his scalp tingling. Then, the white snake opened its mouth again, and outspewed a brand new Uchiha Chi, covered in slime. This Uchiha Chi was completely pale, with 2 eerie streaks of purple eyeshadow at the corners of his eyes. A closer look revealed that the pale skin wasn't human skin, but rather pale, snake-like scales. It held a strange, eerie beauty. Uchiha Chi suddenly opened his eyes, his crimson irises blazing as he glared fiercely at the third AI. Die for me, you old bastard. The sudden change was so swift, AI had no way to change his movements, to break free from Uchiha Chi's grip. And at that moment, Uchiha Chi's eyes glared furiously, bloodshot instantly forming in the whites of his eyes, tears of blood streaming down. Senjutsu, Sharingan, White Itsukoshi, and, accompanied by this Senjutsu Eye technique, which AI absolutely could not dodge at this moment, Uchiha Chi opened his mouth again. From his mouth, a golden sword light instantly burst out. The Kusanagi sword, gleaming with brilliant golden light, was instantly spat out, shooting from AI's right side towards the temple of the fierce old man clad in the strongest lightning release armor. Compound ninjutsu, supersonic shock vacuum wind blade. At that moment, AI truly felt the danger of death. The intuition of danger even made his forehead cold, and every strand of hair on his head stood on end. Normally, under the strongest lightning release armor, the Uchiha brat's golden sword light would take a while to cut through his defenses, and he would have this brief moment to react and counterattack. But if he was caught in an illusion and lost consciousness, the situation would be completely different. He would become prey to Uchiha Chi's slaughter, and Uchiha Chi would have plenty of time to cut through his defenses and kill him. Damn it, that disgusting Uchiha brat. AI's scalp tingled, and he glared back at Uchiha Chi, who was now clinging to his shoulder, gazing at him with a cruel, inhuman gaze. His fury grew steadily, reaching its peak. At that moment, those crimson, snake-like pupils transformed into two giant red dragons, tightly entangling him and dragging him into a world of illusion. Then, swallowing the dragon ball, they unleashed a pale beam that enveloped him. The sturdy body remained in a charging stance, but the old man, enveloped in lightning, momentarily lost consciousness. With a swoosh, golden sword light pierced the strongest lightning armor. Looking at AI, whose forehead was covered in sweat and whose body was trembling, unconscious and reduced to only instinct, Uchiha Chi licked his lips excitedly. Come on, let me see, after losing this bastard shell, what's left of you, Hokage. His throat surged, and he opened his mouth to spew out golden sword light, pressing the Kusanagi sword downward inch by inch. So, chisel, chop, split, give me insight. And just as Uchiha Chi was thinking and acting on these thoughts, something unexpected happened. Ha-a-a. With a single blow, he sliced through the golden sword light that was cleaving through the strongest lightning release armor. With a swish, using his body to challenge a divine weapon, AI's left hand flew out in an instant. The remaining half of his palm formed a black lightning hand blade, which, with unparalleled force, slammed into Uchiha Chi's face. Bang! Like a watermelon exploding, red and white objects flew everywhere, and Uchiha Chi lost his balance and fell from AI's shoulder, slamming helplessly into the ground. At that moment, the third Hokage, AI, gasped and awoke, staring with lingering fear at the Kusanagi sword, which had pierced his shoulder after cleaving through the lightning release armor. Before him, a group of Konoha ninjas stood, stunned by the scene. AI's eyes suddenly darkened, his fury glaring like two sharp swords as he swept across the Konoha ninja. Then, a ferocious smile flashed across his face. Without stopping, he angrily raised the finger that had thrust so far and pointed it at the crowd. Sprint, sprint like crazy. The rage in his heart surged like the sea in a storm. He had actually been forced into such a situation by this evil Uchiha brat. He had actually been forced into such a situation. His rage reached its peak, sounding the final call for this hellish thrust. Then, all of you die for me. However, damn it, it's you who should be the one. At this moment, a hoarse voice suddenly rang out from the side, one so familiar to AI that it was etched into his bones and hard to forget. The Uchiha Chi who had rushed out from his right and suddenly reappeared like a lingering ghost, glaring with a pair of scarlet sharingans, his face covered in blood, grasping a huge azure ball and hitting the one-eyed old man's right arm. With a roar even louder, more angry, and more ferocious than his own, he shouted fiercely, Senfa, Super Eye, take your kidney and liver. Chapter 258, The lightning spear pierces the armor and leads to a desperate situation. There was once a story about an arms merchant who sold both shields and spears. He boasted about his shield, saying, my shield is incredibly strong, nothing can penetrate it. He also boasted about his spear, saying, my spear is incredibly sharp, it can pierce anything solid. Someone then asked him, what would happen if your spear pierced your shield? The merchant murmured, remaining silent. But in the ninja world, the answer to this question has been clearly stated. The third Hokage, who battled the 8 tails for 3 days and 3 nights, severing all 8 tails and beating the beast to the point of being unable to stand, lost consciousness from exhaustion and fell unconscious. Unconsciously, he unleashed the hellish thrust, Plunkant, piercing his own strongest lightning release armor, leaving a lightning-shaped scar on his left chest. This was the third Hokage's only weakness. Even with Uchiha Chi's current strength, facing such a formidable opponent, he seemed too weak. His only conceivable method of defeating his opponent was to emulate Naruto in the future 4 wars. Using this intelligence, he could have the third Hokage pierce his lightning release armor with a single strike of the hellish thrust, one-handed hand technique, piercing his heart and killing him. However, Uchiha Chi now faced the living third Hokage AI, possessing an immensely strong will and superhuman reflexes. This warrior, a veteran of countless battles, who had shed blood and sweat to climb to the pinnacle of Kage, could not be forcibly controlled by Kabuto Yakushi. Only a mindless, crushing and pure world formation with superhuman configuration could rival that. Naruto's attack could only deceive the remotely controlled Kabuto Yakushi. He wanted to deceive the third Hokage AI directly, to make him lower his guard and unknowingly overlook this weakness. Uchiha Chi had no choice but to fight for his life. Every beating he had endured, every bloody battle, every unleashed power, every price he had paid, all for the sake of deceiving his opponent. For this very moment, The moment closest to success, the moment when he was most vulnerable to complacency. The snake clone, which had been lurking underground ever since the Earth's wrath was unleashed, had been lurking in wait for the enemy's attack, taking advantage of the sudden surge. Now, it suddenly leaped. Lifting a massive, azure Rasengan, it struck, striking AI's outstretched right forearm. In that instant, AI's eyes widened, his mouth hanging open as if he had lost his voice. He could only watch as his own hellish thrust, one-handed piercing hand, forcibly pierced his own strongest lightning release armor. Then, his fingertips thrust forward, piercing through. The muscles in his left chest trembled and spasmed, then were split open by the sharp lightning. Aiming for the heart, he pierced through with a thud. Puff. Blood spurted out high. A scorching night wind swept across the field, carrying clouds of dust. The pale lightning that had been tearing through the endless sea of fire suddenly stopped, its heavy footsteps stirring up a dust storm. The sudden turn of events had surpassed all expectations. The Konoha ninja stared in astonishment at the third Raikage, who had stopped right before them, thrusting his right arm into his left chest, blood gushing from his mouth. Everyone looked at each other, and then, well done. See, the Konoha ninjas clenched their fists and praised. Even Uchiha Setsuna, whose face was solemn and had nearly been hit by a stunt, breathed a sigh of relief and let out a faint, tired smile. Seeing this, Sarutobi Shinosuke perked up and immediately tightened his grip on the heian. Good opportunity. With Sarutobi Shinosuke's warning, the expressions of the surrounding people immediately froze. Shinosuke, Hayama, cooperate with my Garoya. Let's attack together, give this guy the final blow. Inuzuka Jaguar, standing beside Sarutobi Shinosuke, immediately raised his hands and formed a cross seal. He shouted, and with his large yellow dog, he lunged towards the third Raikage. In an instant, the man and the dog transformed into two whirling spikes, whistling outwards, then merged in mid-air into a two-headed wolf, its head spinning madly. Bayan Yushin and Sarutobi Asuma exchanged a glance and nodded, immediately diving forward and forming hand seals to follow. This decision was well considered. Among the current Konoha ninjas, their wind style and the Inuzuka family's secret ninjutsu, Garafang, possessed the greatest penetrating power. Combining wind-style Shin Ichimonji and Konoha-style vacuum sword, two single-purpose wind-style ninjutsu, with the Inuzuka family's secret technique, the combined power of these three could potentially open a gap in the lightning armor, allowing the Abiran clan's nano-venomous insects to enter and poison them. This strategy was feasible. However, Hyuga Hisashi, who was watching the situation on the field with his eyes rolled up, suddenly widened his eyes, as if he had seen something terrifying, and shouted in a hurry, "Wait, don't go up anymore, retreat." At the same time, Uchiha Chi, who had just crawled out of the mouth of the body in the sea of fire, saw this scene, his pupils shrank, and he immediately shouted in shock, "Go! This is not a battle you can interfere with." As soon as the voice fell, Uchiha Chi endured the pain all over his body, picked up the Kusanagi sword on the ground with sweat on his forehead, and rushed towards the direction of the third Raikage. From the memory fed back by the clone after it exploded due to exhaustion of chakra, the third Raikage was not dead yet. "Don't look down on me. This attack is even for the shadow." Inuzuka Jua, who was in midair and had already rushed out with no way to retreat, gritted his teeth and stared at the third Raikage. But the next moment, the combined yellow-skinned two-headed wolf's four eyes widened in shock, as if struck by a club. AI, frozen in place, suddenly opened his eyes in fury and yanked his right hand from his chest, sending up a gushing fountain of blood. Through the blood-stained hole in his chest, one could even vaguely see his rapidly beating heart. His strongest lightning armor flickered for a moment before quickly stabilizing itself. And now, on his blood-soaked right hand, he pulled it free. It wasn't the single finger that had pierced his chest with a hell thrust, but four fingers joined together to form a hand blade. As the hell thrust pierced his chest, the third Raikage, with a powerful reaction, transformed it into a four-handed attack. Before it could pierce his heart, he clamped his hand with his muscles, abruptly stopping the four-handed attack. Ho-ho, AI panted heavily, his head suddenly raised, his fierce gaze fixed on the two-headed wolf charging at him. The next moment, he leaped into the air. Grasping one wolf head with one hand, and with his other hand, only his thumb remaining, he also grasped the other head with two fingers. Then, with a ripping sound, bang, bang, the wolf's body split in two, its two heads instantly crushed. Inuzuka Jua, dead. Before the blood could rain down on the ground, lightning flashed again, streaking across the sky in an instant. Sarutobi Shinosuke and Shirogane Hoyama had halted their steps at Hinata Hizushi's warning, but their reaction was as slow as a tortoise's crawl before the pale lightning. Heavy flow explosion, a massive arm appeared between the two men, launching a powerful, thunderous elbow strike. Bang! Bang! Instantly, the two men flew out like arrows, reaching hundreds of meters away and knocking down trees beneath the cliffs. Their whereabouts were unknown, their lives unknown. The rapidly charging Uchiha paused, a sudden premonition of danger rising within him, and he instinctively leaped to the side. The next moment, lightning flashed again before him. Ai, watching Uchiha's movements closely within the lightning, launched a single kick straight at his abdomen. Yileishen Fury Thunder Axe, with a swish, the lightning narrowly streaked past Uchiha's side, accompanied by a resounding boom. Uchiha had no time to dodge, and the lightning, like a blade, sliced through his leg, instantly crushing it to smithereens. Hiss! Uchiha gasped, his scalp tingling. He propped himself up with one hand and leaped back to his feet, his new leg already fully regenerated. His heartstrings clenched like a wound-up spring, and his expression heavy as he stared at the old man who had stopped nearby. He clenched his fists and gritted his teeth. He had exhausted nearly every possible means, but still, he couldn't defeat this fellow. This old man named Ai was too strong. So strong that it even made Uchiha despair. At that moment, Ai stopped, narrowed his eyes, and surveyed Uchiha's abdomen. So that's how it is. The moment my killing intent emerged, before I even began to act, this brat was able to predict my movements, and there's this tailed beast that can slightly affect my will, absorbing chakra from it, constantly supporting me in battle. This wasn't revealed in the intelligence. From the beginning, he had sensed that his emotional fluctuations were a bit unnatural. Now, he had finally confirmed the source of the abnormality, the tailed beast in the brat's abdomen. Combined with the intelligence his men had gathered about that entity, he finally understood the brat's power. Standing in the sea of scorching flames that spread across the entire cliff face, Ai stared coldly at Uchiha. You're like an indestructible flea. Then, he stretched out his right hand and tore off the blood-stained clothing on his upper body, revealing his muscular body with a back like a ghost's face. Ai's eyes turned cold as he glanced at the trembling two tails not far away. With one hand, he grasped the huge yellow-brown jar at his feet, which was sealed with the word Chen. But all this, it ends here. Chapter 259, Erway escapes. This is war. When the Sandaime Raikage's gaze fell upon the two tails, Uchiha's eyelids twitched slightly. The two tails' presence was crucial to his ability to battle such a formidable opponent as Ai. Thanks to the two tails' chakra emanating from the cliffs and the Sandaime Raikage's own extreme emotions, he was able to unleash his ninjutsu relentlessly, even beating the Sandaime Raikage to his current state. As long as this remained unnoticed, he could even proudly declare to the Sandaime Raikage, hands on his hips and patting his chest, I can play with you all day. After all, the Sandaime Raikage was still a human being, not an impure world form. While the blow through his chest might not have killed him, it was still a serious injury, and Uchiha doubted it would have had any effect on him. In this environment, Uchiha was practically no different from someone resurrected by the impure world reincarnation. Endless chakra, an immortal body, and the ability to engage in extreme tactics, trading life for life with his opponent endlessly, the balance of power shifted towards Uchiha. However, ninja combat was a battle of intelligence. As both sides continued to toss their cards, Uchiha's intelligence inevitably reached the third Raikage. At that moment, amidst the charred ruins, scattered wildfires drifted erratically, carried by the wind. The third Raikage glanced coldly at the two tails, who had been knocked to the ground by him and had been quietly monitoring the battlefield since he had gotten up. He then single-handedly lifted the enormous brown-yellow jar at his feet, suddenly raised his head, and shouted coldly at the giant cat demon, Two-Tail. Seeing this movement and hearing this shout, Two-Tail Matatabi shuddered, unsure of what painful memory might have brought back. He dared not even reply, and even took several steps back under the third Raikage's fierce gaze. Then, Ai exhaled deeply, his face darkening, and he said, I will let you go. For 3 years, I will not capture you. Uchiha and Two-Tail were startled at these words, but Two-Tail's face lit up with joy. Such a good thing? Leaving Kumagakure, escaping its fate as a prisoner, that was what it had always sought. Since the third Raikage, the cage of the village, had promised such a thing. It knew he would not break his promise. Uchiha Chi's face suddenly darkened. Without the Two Tails' unconscious energy supply, how could he use the market to fight the wreckage? Just as he was about to speak to dissuade the Two Tails, telling them that the Kumaga-cure's words were untrustworthy and that he should join forces with him, he saw the Two Tails, overjoyed at the wreckage's promise. Without a glance back, he raised his giant palm and leaped out, swiftly sprinting behind the third wreckage and towards the southern exit of Hell Valley. Without a word, he decisively sold Uchiha Chi out. Uchiha Chi, true to his promise, the third wreckage stood his ground, glaring coldly at Uchiha Chi, preventing him from escaping. At this point in the battle, for Uchiha Chi's death outweighed the need to immediately capture the Two Tails and bring them back to the village. He could figure out a way to deal with the Two Tails later, but tonight, this brat had already given him too many surprises, and he couldn't let it grow any further. Only someone like him, who had lived through that era, could understand what this maniacal, reckless Uchiha would eventually become if he were allowed to grow stronger. Just like the man who had terrorized the entire ninja world over 40 years ago, fearing his sudden rebellion, Uchiha Madara. Thinking back to his youth, witnessing that terrifying being roaring Hashirama and slashing the land of lightning with a single flaming sword, the third wreckage felt a growing weight on his heart. Indeed, it wasn't the land of water that Madara had struck with his sword. It was the land of lightning. After all, the Valley of the End lies precisely at the border between the land of rice and the land of fire. The only place capable of striking the other side, a mountainous region, from that location is the land of lightning. Meanwhile, watching the Two Tails leave without being able to stop them, Uchiha Chi's expression darkened slightly. The chakra provided by the Zero Tails in his abdomen immediately plummeted, causing his chakra regeneration rate to drop dramatically. Simultaneously, his perception, enhanced by the tailed beast's chakra, and the Zero Tails' ability to absorb extreme emotions also began to diminish. It continued to shrink to within 5 meters. Uchiha Chi took a deep breath and glanced solemnly at the third wreckage. With the remaining chakra in this area, combined with the chakra he could gain from continuing close combat with a physical ninja like the wreckage, as long as he didn't use the Great Snake-style substitution technique repeatedly like he had just done, and was careful, he could still hold out. If he continued to hold out, he could wait for reinforcements. However, the third wreckage's wound wouldn't last much longer. After all, it was a genuine hole in his chest that wouldn't close for a while. However, Ai faced Uchiha Chi with a look that seemed to see through his thoughts. He snorted coldly, then said with a gloomy face, "Kid, are you thinking of continuing to fight with me? Are you thinking of continuing to steal chakra from me? Are you thinking that you have already won?" Ai suddenly raised his head, his eyebrows raised, veins popping out on his face, staring at Uchiha Chi, and then, he shouted coldly, "Wrong." Then, he suddenly raised his right hand and shouted angrily, "Beat." With a swing of his strong arms, a shadow suddenly rose from behind the third wreckage, like a collapsing building. The octopus tentacles swept across the ground and shook the earth. A giant beast with a human body and a bull's head rose from the ground and roared to the sky. Uchiha Chi's pupils suddenly constricted, and he leaped away, dodging the massive tentacles that were sweeping forward. As if Uchiha Chi were stalling, the time bought by the third wreckage allowed the Eight Tails to gather enough chakra for its full manifestation. At the wreckage's cries, Killer Bee unleashed the attack without hesitation. Ai, the third wreckage, wore a face devoid of emotion. He didn't pursue Uchiha Chi, allowing him to distance himself from them. "Kid, don't blame me for being mean." Ai simply gazed at Uchiha Chi calmly, then took a deep breath, his gaze instantly condensing into cold glare. After all, this is war. The next moment, Ai, with an expressionless expression, suddenly swung his arm to the side, pointing at the Konoha ninjas led by Uchiha Setsuna, and shouted in a deep voice, "B, use the tailed beast balls and kill those people first." "Yes, boss." The eight-tailed Gyuki's face stretched into a human-like, ferocious smile. With a cry of agreement, he immediately raised his head and opened his enormous mouth. Swish! Like 10,000 exhaust fans running simultaneously, a violent wind blew. Blue-black chakra particles gathered in the massive bull's mouth, condensing and slowly solidifying into a tailed beast ball that was pitch black, deep, and filled with an absurd and destructive aura. Chapter 260, Unine Collapse Plan, launched. At this moment, in the land of lightning, thousands of miles away from the battlefields of Hell Valley, In the Hidden Cloud Village, the buildings of this ninja village are mostly built atop towering peaks, shrouded in mist and filled with a reverberating roar of thunder. The Hokage building, nestled in the heart of the village, resembles a butt plug? In the village's heart, in the Hokage's office, Orochimaru sat on the Hokage's throne as if he were in no man's land, flipping through documents considered top secret even in the Hidden Cloud Village. Scrolls containing the secrets of the lightning release armor, documents documenting the Ninja War Conference, a top-secret Kame Island movement route for forging the perfect Jinchuriki, maps of various border defenses, and even a madcap raid plan devised by the Hidden Cloud Village. Looking at the nearly priceless intelligence in his hands, Orochimaru felt a mixture of excitement and a sigh of regret. Jiraiya had toiled for years, gathering and deducing intelligence from every corner of the ninja world, from taverns, brothels, and even from small villages, but the information he had gathered wasn't even a tenth as detailed as these documents. So, what on earth was that guy up to? Was he still pursuing the so-called child of prophecy? Shaking his head, Orochimaru packed up the copy documents and dropped them into the mouth of the waiting summoning snake. Just as he was about to leave, satisfied, he caught sight of an open-sealed scroll on the corner of the Hokage's desk. Is this the scroll containing the Hidden Cloud Village's sacred artifact? The amber purifier was taken. Orochimaru frowned slightly, picked up the scroll, and beneath it, on a stack of non-confidential intelligence documents, he spotted a familiar profile picture. Uchiha Chi. Also, is this the battle plan for Jigakudani? It detailed the movements of the tailed beasts, the Blood Pond Clan's alliance, the Hidden Cloud Force's upcoming actions, and the coordinated bombardment plan for the two Jinchuriki in Jigakudani. Flipping through the document, he found 2 lines of handwritten notes from the Sandaime Hokage summarizing the intelligence. For this Uchiha with its complex combat system, if necessary, attempt to capture its core, abandon the planned recovery of the 2 tails. Use the sacred artifact, the amber purifier, to forcibly extract the tailed beast within it, thereby stripping away its immortality. Seeing this, Orochimaru's face darkened. If this plan was as described, then... He suddenly stood up from his seat as the Hokage and turned around. Cold golden snake eyes gazed down at the cloud and thunder village beneath the floor-to-ceiling windows. He gazed at the peaceful city below, ablaze with lights, children carefree as they ran from street to street, women returning home in groups after a day's work under the night sky, ninjas, still sweating, wielding swords amidst the steep peaks as they trained, and, looking at this territory, which seemed almost completely undefended to him, Orochimaru took a deep breath, his expression transformed into a cold and indifferent one. Hokage, please don't blame me for being mean, he muttered hoarsely, calmly gazing at the peaceful and tranquil village below. Then, he raised his palm, his gaze instantly condensing into a cold gleam. After all, this is war. As Orochimaru raised his palm, fully armed figures suddenly leaped out from behind him. Scatter! Orochimaru's eyes were icy, and he clasped his hands together, forming the final way seal of his summoning technique. He raised his palm, fingers spread wide. Suddenly, a slap landed on the floor-to-ceiling window of the Hokage's office, unleashing a summoning spell before him that stretched beyond his sight. Then, the Kumagakure collapse plan, begin now. The next moment, boom, accompanied by a raging wind and a roar that shook the entire Kumagakure village. Countless Kumagakure villagers looked up and witnessed a scene they would never forget. A giant, 8-headed, white-scaled snake powerfully blasted through the Hokage building, perched atop that sacred edifice considered sacred by all Kumagakure ninjas. All 8 heads roared to the heavens simultaneously, as if venting the endless rage suppressed deep within their hearts. Roar, Hell Valley. The swirling wind lifted everything aloft. Standing beneath the terrifying beast that shook the earth and sky, the third Hokage, Ai, felt a sense of something. He turned his head and glanced towards the village, his heart suddenly beating violently for some unknown reason. He shook his head, thinking it was the injury from his hand that had caused him to feel a momentary daze. His expression quickly settled, his gaze fixed in the direction of Uchiha Chi. A large hand gripped the enormous, tan jar at his feet, and Ai narrowed his eyes dangerously. This jar was a treasure passed down through generations of the Hidden Cloud Village. It was said to be a sacred artifact crafted by the Six-Path Sage, the Amber Purifier Bottle. Despite being called a bottle, it was actually a large jar, making it awkward to carry. However, its effects were incredibly potent. After using this ninja tool, any enemy called upon and responding would be forcibly sealed within the Amber Purifier Bottle. Compared to the harsh and insidious effects of other Six Paths tools, this one was relatively straightforward, and its responsive seal mechanism was broad, with few restrictions. In theory, anyone with information could circumvent the seal by remaining silent. However, the third Hokage, AI, had a unique tactic that guaranteed sealed his enemies. As long as one is physically strong enough to carry this heavy artifact, screaming their enemy's name while beating them until they scream in agony, no tailed beast, can escape the amber bottle's powerful seal. Indeed, screams and wails are essentially a response to the abuser. Moreover, AI stared coldly at Uchiha Chi, who stopped dead in his tracks not far away, his expression changing dramatically before charging back without hesitation. Seeing this, a sneer crossed his face. A woman's mercy on the battlefield will only cost you her life. It seems you've made your choice. AI took a deep breath, raised his fists, bent his legs slightly, and his eyes were fierce. But unfortunately, you've chosen a dead end. With this thought in mind, AI immediately took a large step forward, leaning forward to charge. Killer B, him, and Uchiha Chi formed a straight line behind AI. Instantly, the distance between them drastically closed as they collided. At that moment, Uchiha Chi stared intently at the tailed beast ball about to be unleashed from the eight-tailed Gyu's mouth, suppressed rage threatening to burst his chest. Seeing the third Hokage charging towards him, he no longer cared to conserve chakra. He immediately channeled a massive amount of chakra into the tightly grasped Kusanagi sword. In his palm, chakra from the four elements, wind, fire, thunder, and water, combined into a single sword. In an instant, it converged into a single point. Then, Uchiha Chi simply closed his eyes and acted on instinct. Because next, he was about to accomplish a nearly impossible feat. Chapter 261 Thunder Escape Kirin. He rushed to Killer B's position. At ninja speed, it would only take a breath, or even less. But between them lay the third Hokage, AI. Like a wall of sighing thunder, it practically blocked all paths for Uchiha Chi to advance. But at this moment, Uchiha Chi had no time to think. Could he, with all his might, break through the third Hokage's obstruction? Would he still have the power to stop Killer B from releasing the tailed beast ball after getting past him? What would be the consequences of failure? His complex thoughts converged in a single moment, without hesitation. A long, condensed white aura was drawn into his chest and expelled like a long dragon. In his right hand, Uchiha Chi dragged the Kusanagi sword, radiating four colors, backward, and dashed in his chosen direction. His left hand reached for his waist, swung with a flash of blade, and stabbed directly into his neck. The sharp edge of the kunai pierced his throat and vocal cords, then sliced downwards, severing the trachea connecting to his lungs. The human vocal apparatus consists of the lungs, diaphragm, trachea, vocal cords, oral cavity, nasal cavity, and pharynx. If the airflow were cut off, temporarily crippling the vocal apparatus, if the ruptured eardrums were not repaired, if the eyes were not opened, then Uchiha Chi would be rendered blind, deaf, and dumb. If he didn't see, he wouldn't be deceived by the speed that surpassed his vision. If he didn't listen, he wouldn't hear the third Hokage's cries. If he didn't answer, he wouldn't be sealed by the Amber Purifier. And the Amber Purifier, a Six Paths artifact requiring vast quantities of chakra to activate, would only become a burden to the third Hokage. After a brief yet intense battle, Uchiha Chi had a clear understanding of his opponent's speed. Now, his speed wouldn't be any faster than before. And in the silent darkness, seemingly lurking countless unspeakable things, Uchiha Chi began to recall. He recalled diligently, relentlessly, with all his might. Now, with his heart punctured and unable to burn like a mechanical dog, he recalled the month and a half of special training, the foundations he had solidified as a mere Uchiha ninja. The timing of his attacks, the control between techniques, the integration of intelligence, and the endless, day and night practice of swordsmanship. And then, in this deep, lightless, and silent darkness, Uchiha Chi suddenly realized a power that transcended powerful ninjutsu, illusions, and physical techniques, something inherent in humanity, hidden in his blood, something even more fundamental. As the saying goes, what you lose in one place, you gain in another. The powerful and flashy moves he used in the past, the combination of countless ninjutsu, and the endless pursuit of power had instead tarnished Uchiha Chi's inherent talent. Having abandoned all of this, at this moment, a subtitle quietly jumped before his eyes: Talent, Combat Intuition, S+, has been developed to a higher level, allowing you to perceive the world more clearly and use your senses more skillfully. Current rank, Combat Intuition, SS, Mastered. Talent, Combat Intuition, gains new affix, All-Powerful. All-Powerful, the moment you gain this ability, all your abilities gain one proficiency level, including your talent. Due to your talent, your skill, Uchiha Style, Sun Dance, S, increases in rank. Currently, Mastery 0 for 1000. This skill gains a new affix, Precognition. Precognition. The Uchiha clan's swordsmanship is rooted in generations of ancestors who, through the Sharingan, replicated the swordsmanship, physical techniques, and ninjutsu of all major ninja schools. Within this realm, you can predict your opponent's movements solely through swordsmanship. The sublimation of his abilities was like a gentle rain that moistened everything silently. At this moment, unlike Zero Tail's initial outburst, he couldn't clearly sense the endless flow of power flowing through his body. However, Uchiha Chi vaguely felt that he could now defeat 10 of his former selves without a single breath. This heightened combat instinct, combined with the steel of his heart, revealed its truly brutal side at this moment. Mastering all martial arts, without any prerequisites, he disregarded everything, raising all abilities by one level of proficiency. This included the Sharingan, a gifted gift from his bloodline. The next moment, Uchiha Chi's eyes suddenly opened. Two Megadamas whirled wildly around his pitch black, piercing vertical pupils. Transformed by natural energy, the snake-shaped Sharingan already possessed a perceptive power comparable to that of a 3 Megadama eye. Now, it was as if a barrier had been pierced. Still at 2 Megadama, the world before him seemed to be sped down by 0.5, 0.25, and 0.125 times the speed, revealing everything in its entirety. The Hokage charged towards him, raising 2 fingers and taking a step, unleashing the hell thrust, Nihonkind. The subtle trembling of his muscles in this stance, the way his hair stood on end, the way he glared at himself and roared, even the trajectories of the lightning that swirled around his body, flashing violently. Uchiha Chi could see it all clearly. Is this the inside of the main Gekyo Sharingan? Excellent, Uchiha Chi grinned slightly, instantly locking onto the man with this powerful dynamic vision, his eyes wide. Since I can see through your movements with these eyes, then, Uchiha Chi's face hardened, and as he raced, he grasped the Kusanagi sword with both hands, his head raised fiercely. Hokage, with a strike, I'll defeat you. Everything happened in a flash. The fierce figure, shrouded in pale lighting, and Uchiha Chi, dragging a 4-colored sword, met in an instant. Hell thrust, Nihonkind, 2 fingers thrust forward instantly. As if moving forward, Uchiha Chi, sensing danger, stomped his feet, spun, and leaped high. Lightning flashed beneath him instantly. Passing through him like lightning, AI's eyes suddenly darkened, and he turned his gaze. The same dodging method won't fool me a second time. Lightning flashed wildly, his heart pounding. AI breaks suddenly, twisting his foot against the ground. Crack! Crack! Spiderweb-like cracks on the ground instantly crawled, spread, and then collapsed. After forcibly stopping himself, AI bent his legs and suddenly raised his head, staring directly at Uchiha Chi, who was suspended in midair with nowhere to hide. He elbowed the amber flask on his back and roared, Uchiha Chi, now, let me hear your screams. Bang! Lightning blasted. AI leaped up again, swung his arm back, and stabbed Uchiha Chi's temple with a hand blade. The temple has long been a vital point, home to numerous nerves, arteries, and veins. More importantly, the bones there are extremely fragile. A single poke from AI could fracture a bone, piercing an artery in the brain, instantly perceiving the excruciating pain. However, facing this oncoming blow, I saw it. Uchiha Chi suddenly perked up, his eyes wide open. The third Raikage's Taijutsu and Yanryu sword techniques are closely related, and the foundation of this hand blade is derived from Yanryu's Shadow Thunder Thrust. Then, Uchiha Chi twisted and turned in midair. Then, without hesitation, he grasped the Kusanagi sword with both hands and counterattacked the third Raikage's hand blade. You're going to cut my hand off. Seeing this, the third Raikage's eyes suddenly turned cold, but he didn't falter. His expression only grew more ferocious. He even let the 2 tails go just to kill Uchiha Chi. So, even if he had to cut off another hand, as long as he could kill this brat before him, it would be worth it. In an instant, the dazzling longsword, shining with a 4-color sword light of gold, indigo, and white, clashed with a hand knife wrapped in thick thunder. However, the next moment, AI's expression suddenly changed. He saw that the long sword that was about to collide with a hand knife suddenly turned and swept past his swinging arm. And in this process, Uchiha Chi turned his body and quickly circled behind the wreckage. Just like in the battle on the walls of the evil cult of the Land of Hot Water, he could simply turn around and strike back. Using the four-symbol sword, a composite ninjutsu that combined the four elements of wind, fire, thunder, and water, he could pierce the lightning armor and pierce the third wreckage's heart, and he could kill him right there. However, Uchiha Chi, feinting his sword to strike the enemy in front of him and swerving behind the wreckage, didn't deliver the strike. He leaped straight ahead, tumbling to the ground. He ignored the dust and dirt, and the third wreckage might attack him at any moment from behind, and continued to charge forward. Charged towards Killer Bee. Charged towards the Eight Tails. And then, his scarlet Sharingan stared fixedly at the tailed beast ball that was about to take shape and blast the old man Uchiha Setsuna to death. Uchiha Chi gritted his teeth, withdrawing his chakra from the Kusanagi sword. Then, he raised his hands and formed a seal. Facing the swirling clouds high above, he curled his index finger and suddenly unleashed a ninjutsu composed of the last of his chakra. This was the very jutsu that had illuminated the darkness in his eyes when Uchiha Setsuna had appeared before him, fire style, great flame extinguishing, a beam of condensed flame erupted with a roar. However, compared to the earth-shattering ferocity of the Eight Tails, this tiny fire-style ninjutsu seemed so pale and powerless, like burning an elephant with a lighter. However, in the earwax-like silence that followed a blast of his eardrums, amidst the utterly incomprehensible gazes of the wreckage, the Eight Tails transformed Killer Bee, and the rest of the Konoha ninja. Uchiha Chi certainly wasn't foolish enough to burn an elephant with a lighter. So, his choice was to throw the lighter into the sky, igniting the endless clouds that piled high in the night sky. With this wrath of heaven and earth, he would bring this night of hell to a climax. After a brief silence, before the confusion on the battlefield had faded into stunned laughter, Uchiha Chi raised one hand, his eyes bloodshot as he gazed at the Eight Tails, fully formed, as it raised its head, ready to unleash its tailed beast ball. Then, standing on the edge of the cliff, reflecting the terrifying lightning flash that suddenly poured down from the sky, he shouted hoarsely, thunder style, Kirin. Chapter 262 Thunder Roars, Defeating the Eight Tails. Lightning Release, Kirin. Developed by the future Uchiha Sasuke in the original novel, it's considered the pinnacle of lightning release style ninjutsu. It boasts a wide range, immense attack power, minimal chakra consumption, and near impossible to dodge speed. However, this jutsu has significant drawbacks. It requires specific weather conditions and the ability to use the Sharingan to clearly discern and direct the speed and direction of lightning in the sky. Such a jutsu would be useless against the third wreckage, who also wields lightning. His opponent's speed is too great. While Kirin's range is vast, it also disperses the lightning's power, making it uncertain whether it could penetrate the lightning armor. Furthermore, while Uchiha Chi understood the principles of this jutsu and had attempted it during a month and a half of intensive combat training, performing it with the second Magatama was difficult and prone to errors. Therefore, Uchiha Chi chose not to use it against the third wreckage. But at this moment, with his mastery of all martial arts and the enhanced power of the Sharingan under the influence of natural energy, his two Magatama Sharingans advanced 2 levels, gaining the insight only possible with the main Gekyo Sharingan. Add to that the swirling dark clouds brought on by the third wreckage's arrival, and the massive Eight Tails, condensing its tailed beast ball, a living target. Thus, the timing, location, and people were all right. Uchiha Chi instantly realized this was the only option to save Uchiha Setsuna and his companions from the tailed beast ball. At that moment, as Uchiha Chi raised his right hand, his last remaining chakra focused within it, and the blue lightning of lightning release, supersonic thunder blade enveloped his palm. This jutsu, capable only of swords, unleashed within it, briefly puncturing it with electric shock. Squeak, squeak, the gloomy sky suddenly brightened. As if even the sky itself had surrendered to Uchiha Chi, gleaming bolts of lightning spread from the sky like a spiderweb, instantly extending beyond the reach of the human eye. 1,000 thunders roared, like blossoming kale. The pale lightning illuminated the world, illuminating the faces of everyone on the battlefield with a pale white. What is that? The eight-tailed Gyuki suddenly looked up at the sky and swallowed subconsciously. The next moment, its face changed drastically, and it roared at Killer Bee in horror. In the spiritual world, Bee, quickly disperse the tailed beast ball. If that technique is allowed to fall, it will explode along with the tailed beast ball. However, Killer Bee, who was sitting on the tip of the eight-tail's nose at this time, had a dazed look on his face, staring at the sky outside, as if he couldn't hear the Ushikimi's reminder at all. He muttered blankly, "It's too late. It's already too late. It's absolutely impossible to dodge this technique." Killer Bee's face was pale, and he lay back as if all the strength in his body had been drained. He collapsed on the nose of the eight-tail's Ushikimi, and said in despair, "He has completed the accumulation of strength, and the lightning. It only takes 1,000th of a second, faster than the speed of sound." Just as he said, in the outside world, standing in front of the eight-tails that was like a building, Uchiha Chi had a ferocious face, and his open fingers suddenly clenched towards his palm. "Come!" a roar echoed in his heart. Comma, boom. Thunder, which stretched to the edge of his sight, flashed suddenly at the junction of heaven and earth. Guided by the lightning in his palm, it converged towards the sky where Uchiha Chi stood. Then, a divine thunder beast, even larger, more majestic, and more magnificent than the eight tails in its full form, poked its head out from the murky clouds. Its maw opened wide, its eyes bloodshot, its body composed entirely of lightning. A single glimpse of its presence left a lasting impression on those present. Then, "Ang!" the enraged beast roared, and a devastating blow descended from the sky. "Disappear with the thunder?" Uchiha Chi stared intently at the eight tails, which tilted its head heavenward, continuously gathering the tailed beast balls, and shouted silently and ferociously. The eye could not grasp it, the mind could not react, and the ear was 1,000 times slower. This strike transformed into a straight, incredibly thick bolt of lightning. It didn't seem to fall, but rather, it seemed to instantly connect the heavens, the earth, the eight tails, and the tailed beast ball in the eight tails' mouth. Then, it thundered down. A pale light scattered in all directions. Everything was drowned in the sound of thunder, reduced to paleness, to charcoal, and pulverized. Boom. The tailed beast ball in the mouth of the eight tails in its perfect form was crushed from the front of its mouth by the endless thunder, hammering into its stomach. A dull explosion instantly erupted, creating a sandstorm that rose wildly from the cliff face and spread outward in all directions. Under such terrifying power, mortals could not bear to look directly. Everyone could only raise their hands to cover their faces, blocking their ears with chakra to prevent being deafened by the spreading sound waves. The entire cliff was instantly reduced to charred black, leaving only the remaining flames of the lightning strike, telling of the horror of this ultimate ninjutsu. Until the dust cleared, and everyone opened their eyes to see the immense, ferocious tailed beast, the eight tails, that towered so majestically just moments ago, now reduced to a charred, dusty mess. Only the eight tails Jinchuriki, Killer Bee, lay charred and scorched on the cliff face, his life uncertain. Having absorbed the full force of the lightning release, Kirin spread damage in his fully formed form, and then taken a near maximum tailed beast ball from the other beast. Even if Killer Bee survived, his injuries would have meant he couldn't recover. However, before everyone could marvel at the majesty of this ultimate lightning release, they saw a young man, his body charred and his face stained with black blood, streaking like a straight line across the horrific battlefield towards Killer Bee. It was Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Chi knew that with his chakra completely depleted and the third Raikage still standing strong, no one could stand against him. The only way for them to survive was to capture the defeated Killer Bee and threaten the third Raikage AI with his life, buying time. Although the battle seemed to last a long time, it took no more than a dozen minutes. Even with the Flying Thunder God, Minato's initial claim of needing to reach Hell Valley from Konoha would take half an hour. The only way to make ends meet was to find a way to take Killer Bee. However, watch out behind you, everyone's hearts raced. This was because Uchiha Chi wasn't the only one sprinting across the field. There was another, even faster, more ruthless, and quicker than him, the third Raikage AI. An inexplicable glint flickered in his gaze. With that swift strike, the brat had clearly seized the opportunity and the flaw in his technique. He could easily have pierced through his lightning armor from behind and stabbed him in the heart. However, in order to protect the group of people standing behind him, he gave up this opportunity and chose to attack Killer Bee instead. Such a move shocked the third Raikage for a moment, and then he was silent. This choice at the critical moment of life and death also made him truly understand what kind of person Uchiha Chi was. I see, for the things that are really important to you, you will protect them with both hands to the end even if you lose your precious life. Thinking of this, I looked at Uchiha Chi with a hint of recognition. Not all ninjas are cunning. Compared with some rope camping dogs, Such people are more to their liking for the fighting village of Yunnan that advocates brotherhood. Uchiha Chi, you are undoubtedly a true ninja, a young genius who truly possesses the awakening of the shadow at such a young age. If you could be born in the hidden cloud village, I would definitely pass on the position of the fourth Hokage to you. AI turned around suddenly, lifted up the giant altar on his back, immediately took a bow stance, pulled back with one arm, and was about to throw the giant altar like a javelin. But his eyes were fierce, and a fierce light flashed. It was like anger, like shame, with a little regret, and more of it was determination. You are really too dangerous. Even if I lose, I will definitely kill you here. Chapter 263, Oh my God. The various demons and monsters in Uchiha Chi's body started fighting. Almost at the moment the thunder of heaven and earth dissipated, a sudden burst of lightning blazed up again on the field. Like a pale arrow, it shot out in an instant. Then, he stopped, twisted his body, dismounted, and swung the sacred artifact, the amber purifier bottle, on his back with one hand. AI stared at Uchiha Chi as he rushed towards Killer B. At this moment, the boy's ears were bleeding, his throat was pierced by a kunai, and his body was charred. Only his pair of blazing red eyes were as bright as a newborn. He knew that for Uchiha Chi, who could not hear or speak, the sacred artifact, the amber purifier bottle, could no longer seal him. But, kid, don't underestimate the power of a ninja village. AI's eyes were cold, and at this moment, he recalled the information he had heard and seen about Uchiha Chi in the Hokage's office a month ago. The voice of his subordinate Yabu seemed to ring in his ears. Lord Hokage, according to our previous investigation, the tailed beast in Uchiha Chi's body is not one of the 9 tailed beasts. It is a tailless tailed beast artificially cultivated by Shinin, the remnant of the annihilated Sky Ninja village after the Second Shinobi World War, and the Sky Ninja leader who was previously hunted by Orochimaru in the land of hot springs. Its name is. Recalling this, AI's eyes suddenly condensed with a cold light, and he slammed his foot into the ground. Crack! Spider-web-like cracks spread, rocks collapsed, and grass and trees shook. AI took a deep breath, closed the yellow lid of the amber bottle with one hand, and held the amber bottle with the other. Like a standard javelin thrower, he hurled it out. His eyes bulged, his hair and beard stood on end, lightning flashed wildly across his body, and he suddenly roared, "Zero tail, nothingness!" With this roar, the amber bottle transformed into yellow shadow and was flung out by AI. Just before Uchiha Chi reached out and fiercely strangled Killer B, who lay like a mummy on the ground, it flew in front of him. Then, a surge of chakra suddenly rose from the bottle's mouth. It was as if an invisible giant hand stretched out from the bottle, and in the next second, it grasped Uchiha Chi's abdomen. No, more precisely, it grabbed Uchiha Chi's abdomen. At this moment, Uchiha was startled, because he, who had been deaf, suddenly heard a sound. A sound came from his abdomen, like a hard-working 007 who suddenly heard someone roar in his ear after being exhausted. Frightened, he immediately sat up straight, subconsciously responding, "Boss, I'm not slacking off." A childlike voice, as tender as a child, uttered, "Chirp." This sound, transmitted through chakra, vibrated within his body, reaching him only through bone conduction. "Stupid snake, fuck, you agreed." Uchiha Chi's eyes widened as he stared at the zero tail in his abdomen, which had just made a confused response. He felt a tingling sensation from his scalp all the way to his feet, like an electric shock. Yes, the zero tail had a name, and its name was none other than nothingness. Before Uchiha Chi could ponder how the Hokage had learned of this supposedly untraceable information, an overwhelming and terrifying force erupted from the amber jar and suddenly penetrated Uchiha Chi's abdomen. Like a crab claw gripping Mr. Krabs, it gripped the little zero tail tightly, causing his eyes, ears, nose, and tongue to bulge out. Then, it was violently pulled outward. Bang! 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 Suddenly, Uchiha Chi thought he heard the thud of Zero Tail's forehead slamming against the Bagua seal. Then, to his horror, he saw, the Bagua seal had been forcibly chipped open. Then, Zero Tail's dark chakra emerged from his abdomen. Zero Tail, as if realizing something, a flicker of fear flashed across his piercing eyes. He immediately bit down on Uchiha Chi's abdominal muscles, swaying like a red and black flag in the wind, drifting towards the amber bottle. At the same time, Uchiha Chi felt the strength drain from his body rapidly weakening. Bang! He collapsed helplessly to the ground, staring in horror at the brown-yellow jar flying in midair. It was as if he had suddenly arrived on the Pingdingshan set of Journey to the West, where the Silver-Horned King howled at him, "Hey, Uchiha Chi, if I call you, do you dare answer?" Uchiha Chi replied, "You're awesome. I'll just make myself deaf and dumb, and live like one." But just when he thought he had secured victory, the Silver-Horned King suddenly backhanded him and shouted, "Hey, Uchiha Chi's pants, if I call you, do you dare answer?" Uchiha Chi's pants actually did. Thus, he was forced to face the strange situation of struggling to hold on to his pants. The tailed beasts are not only the source of a Jinchuriki's power, but are also closely linked to their very existence. Just as Uchiha Chi's extraction of the two tails from the wooden figure killed him, if the Hokage forcibly extracted the zero tails from him, even with Uchiha Chi's precarious constitution and the numerous attachments within him, it was hard to say whether he would survive. However, what truly terrified Uchiha Chi was that without the zero tails ability to absorb extreme emotions and transform them into chakra, he would be completely powerless to pose any threat to the third Hokage in this battle. In other words, he would be doomed. However, at this moment, Uchiha Chi suddenly felt a sharp pain at the back of his neck, where the Heaven's Curse seal was located. A familiar emerald green chakra suddenly burst out. It was the same emerald green chakra he had extracted when he crushed a cat's eye stone during the fierce battle with Ebizo. As this burst of chakra emerged, Zero Tail, who had been biting his abs so tightly that his teeth were nearly knocked out, suddenly experienced a kind of stress reaction, as if he had received an electric shock. Then, cough, cough, ugh, chirp, cough. Under Uchiha Chi's horrified and bewildered gaze, the little creature began to cough loudly, as if retching from not brushing his teeth this morning. Then, he spat out a familiar emerald green necklace. Uchiha Chi took a closer look, and his bewilderment deepened. "Isn't this Tsunade's necklace?" Then, in the dense forest beside the cliffs of Hell Valley, a spiky-haired boy, hiding at the edge of the battlefield, crouched behind a tree, covering his ears and secretly peeking at the battle, suddenly froze and jerked his head up as if sensing something. Yamato quickly reached out and removed his wristband, revealing a curse seal on his wrist, just like Uchiha Chi's. At that moment, the curse seal glowed slightly, expanding lines that entwined and formed the character Zero in the center of his palm. Seeing this, Yamato suddenly raised his head, glancing at the collapsed Uchiha Chi on the battlefield, and the towering and imposing third Hokage standing nearby. He gritted his teeth, eyes widening, his face trembling. This sudden change reminded him of Orochimaru's words to him, having taken him from Danzo-sama before leaving the village. "Now is the time for you to burn for Konoha?" At this point, facing the threat of having your pants pulled off by Jinkoku Dao, and facing a life-or-death situation, the various demons and monsters within Uchiha Chi finally emerged and began to fight. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 264, Battle Between Humans and Immortals, Cloud Thunder Cannon. At this moment, in Raichi Cave, the rhythmic sound of a wooden fish echoed faintly from somewhere. Beneath the high gates, atop a massive throne, a massive white-scaled snake, coiled sideways against the backrest, eyes closed in deep sleep, suddenly opened its golden eyes. This snake was the master of Raichi Cave, the White Snake Sage. At that moment, its eyes narrowed, and then their golden pupils shone. The next moment, it projected its thoughts, the events of its dreams, and the events of the ninja world it was preoccupied with, before its eyes. This was the White Snake Sage's unique ability, the ability to record and replay images, allowing past experiences to resurface. The name of the technique was Spiritual and Awesome Light, and an image emerged, showcasing Uchiha Chi's tailed beast being extracted by the amber purifying bottle. Seeing this, hiss, the pupils of the white snake immortal shrank suddenly, and his face suddenly became gloomy. "I thought I could cultivate this chess piece until the eyes were awakened and then seize it. At that time, seizing the body of the real dragon and ascending the dragon transformation stage would also bring some help to this old man, but he is ignorant of the danger and provokes a powerful enemy that he cannot defeat. In the end, he will end up dead." The white snake immortal stared at the Zero Tail, whose body had been pulled out by the amber bottle, shook his head, his eyes indifferent. After the Jinchuriki was extracted from the tailed beast, there was only one way left, death. This is something that the Uzumaki clan with the body of a sage cannot resist, but, fortunately, I already had a backup plan. The white snake immortal grinned and sneered faintly. "The only option left is to sacrifice this pawn." Using its immortality and this artificial tailed beast, I can cultivate a soulless body for my use. This divine artifact, in turn, allows me to perfect the theft. This will save me from having to deal with this brat. The Sharingan is a hassle, too. It's useless to have, but a shame to discard. Then, with this thought, the white snake sage's golden eyes suddenly turned cold, then their serpentine pupils suddenly brightened. Sage technique, transmitting the distant shadow. Elsewhere, in the land of lightning, the hidden cloud village. Atop the crumbling Hokage building, Orochimaru stood within the mouth of the Yamada no Orochi, his arms folded as he gazed indifferently at the smoke-filled ruins below him, shrouded in the night. And at the trembling hidden cloud village, pushing its giant object towards him. Having suffered heavy damage from the attack, the Kumagakure ninja finally assembled their forces to launch a counterattack. However, with the Kumagakure army, the Sandaime Hokage, and the two Jinchuriki already out of the village, Orochimaru's defenses seemed vulnerable. But there are exceptions. What is that? Orochimaru narrowed his eyes slightly as he gazed at the massive object being pushed forward by the Kumagakure ninja in the distance. The object consisted of 3 thick steel barrels mounted on a cylindrical frame. The frame housed a recoil mechanism, a cradle, a top mount, an elevation mechanism, a steering mechanism, a stabilizing mechanism, an aiming mechanism, a lower mount, a main frame, and a moving mechanism. It looked very much like one of those outdated weapons recently emerging in the ninja world called cannons, compared to cannons. However, this object was more aesthetically pleasing, its various steel components fitting together perfectly, creating a strange aesthetic. However, the barrel, which required manual cradle aiming, was incapable of hitting the swift-moving ninja. Furthermore, the ammunition, primarily using explosive talismans, was incapable of piercing even the first gate of his triple Rashomon. Orochimaru briefly researched this technique for a few days, but after realizing that gunpowder was far less effective than fire style, he quickly discarded it. Seeing this device being pushed forward by Kumagakure, he shook his head and sighed hoarsely. Ninjas actually need to rely on such external devices. Kumagakure is truly at the end of their rope. Just as Orochimaru was about to control the snake and dispatch it with a sweeping blow, the core regeneration power of the unfinished S-rank forbidden technique, the Yamada no Orochi Jutsu, encountered a minor malfunction, causing the Yamada no Orochi, the embodiment of Orochimaru's obsession, to become slightly disorganized. Then, he sensed the activation of a cursed seal he had cast thousands of miles away. Perhaps it was the Zero Tail, a backup plan he had stitched into Uchiha Chi's body when he left the village, that had been activated. Orochimaru frowned. The forbidden technique, flesh regeneration, obtained through dissection is still incomplete, and the current materials are insufficient to support further development. We must find Shinning and obtain the original from him. Well, Orochimaru shook his head, biting his finger to form the summoning seal and pressing it into the air. Summoning technique, triple Rashomon. His hoarse voice trailed off, and 3 massive Rashomons suddenly rose from the ground. The triple Rashomon, inherited from the first Hokage's 5-layer Rashomon, is a defensive wall summoned to absorb all attacks. The first gate can withstand direct attacks, the second gate reduces the power of the attack, and the third gate diffuses the pressure of the attack. Due to the different functions of these 3 gates, all attacks will be greatly reduced in power upon reaching the practitioner. Faced with a cannon that couldn't even penetrate the first gate, Orochimaru unleashed the triple Rashomon. While this was primarily due to some unforeseen circumstances among his disciples, it was nonetheless a gesture of great respect for Kumagakure. Standing behind the triple gate, ignoring the wailing near his ears, Orochimaru closed his eyes and sensed the situation thousands of miles away. The Curse Seal, also known as the Curse Seal Body Retention Technique, contained fragments of Orochimaru's soul, enabling him to perform such a feat. The principle behind this was similar to the Shadow Clone technique, where explosive memories are fed back into the body, though Orochimaru's technique was more advanced. Soon, Orochimaru raised an eyebrow slightly. The seal on the first Hokage's necklace within Zero Tails has been broken. It looks like the White Snake Sage is about to take action. Realizing the situation, believing Uchiha Chi would die, and so attempting to escape with the object of his desire, Orochimaru couldn't help but curl his lips in a cold smile at the thought. As a sage, yet he's as impatient as a fool. Long before, when the White Snake Sage had taught Uchiha Chi the immortal technique of transmitting the distant shadow, Uchiha Chi had passed this information to Orochimaru through the Uchiha clan's channels. However, Orochimaru never sent Uchiha a receipt or any other explanation. That was because he had a backup plan in place. Every gift from fate comes with a price. Back on the battlefield of Tsunagakure, when Uchiha accepted the White Snake Sage's power, he had been set up by the White Snake Sage. Orochimaru knew this, and he was an expert in this field. Originally inhabiting the Heaven's Curse seal, he was naturally sensitive to the strange powers within it, beyond its natural energies. The White Snake Sage hid his consciousness within the Raichido Senjutsu chakra of the Cat's Eye Stone, believing he could remain undetected. However, after Uchiha returned to the village to seal the Nine Tails, he was admitted to Konoha Hospital. After Orochimaru's examination, he discovered his hiding there. Although Orochimaru didn't know what Uchiha intended, he had already laid a backup plan. This backup plan consisted of Hashirame's cells implanted in Zero Tails and the Shudame Hokage necklace he had obtained from Tsunade. Faced with Uchiha's personality, Tsunade naturally didn't object to Orochimaru's suggestion of using him as its Tsunade trap. Instead, she expressed concern about the necklace's potential curse. Later, Orochimaru extorted Yamato, who possessed wood release, from Danzo. Yamato was the only one capable of activating the Shudame Hokage's hidden power. Moreover, after learning from Uchiha what the White Snake Sage intended, Orochimaru immediately guessed what he intended and how he would achieve it. The key to this technique was the immortal technique, transmitting the distant shadow. This technique allowed him to simultaneously perform two tasks, forcibly stealing the opponent's mind. Facing Uchiha, who possessed the Sharingan, the White Snake Sage chose to use this technique to silently steal the dragon-like persona created by Uchiha's curse seal. He then disguised himself as being controlled by Uchiha using the immortal technique, transmitting the distant shadow, attempting to deceive him and wait for Uchiha to awaken his main Gekyo Sharingan before devouring him and completely controlling him. But now, sensing something was amiss, realizing that Uchiha might die in Hell Valley, the White Snake Sage unhesitatingly activated his backup plan. It will forcibly possess the body with its dragon-like personality and become the new Zero Tails Jinchuriki. It will then activate the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration, to create a new heart within Uchiha's body, which it will then remove as the foundation for its regeneration. Finally, it will utilize the power of the sacred artifact, the Amber Purifying Bottle, to break free from the 8 diagrams seal and escape, intending to carry Uchiha's heart and the Zero Tails to the Dragon Vein of the Wind Country and complete its dragon transformation plan. However, hey, you want to escape? Did you ask me? Orochimaru suddenly opened his golden eyes and sneered hoarsely. Without hesitation, he raised his left hand and formed a hand seal. A symbol of zero appeared on his palm. This was the Hokage-style ear-shunning technique, Kuon Ruiyu Chui Sho. The next moment, a thick golden beam of light blasted out from the Kumagakure position. Countless Kumagakure ninjas died as their chakra was drained by the chakra cannon. Boom. This cannon, which contained the anger, will, and determination of countless Kumagakure people, came roaring down. It blasted the triple Rashomon that Orochimaru had erected in front of him, one after another, with overwhelming force. Seeing this, Orochimaru's smile froze on his face, his pupils suddenly shrinking. He stared in horror at the 3 Rashomon that were blasted through in succession. And to his side, the golden cannon that blasted through the triple Rashomon, its remaining momentum not diminishing, and then shattered the 2 heads of the Yamada no Orochi beside him. What the hell is this? Chapter 265. The ending. At the edge of the cliff in Hell Valley, a bang. A massive brown-yellow jar crashed to the ground, spinning in a circle. Immediately, a giant hand brimming with blue chakra materialized and flew out, clutching the collapsed Uchiha's abdomen. A masked, snake-like, black and red monster was being continuously pulled from Uchiha's abdomen. This was none other than the tailed beast sealed within Uchiha, Zero Tail Void. At that moment, as Zero Tail released the first generation's necklace, its grip on Uchiha's abdominal muscles loosened, and the entire snake suddenly flew backwards. Just as it was about to fall into the jar, the third Raikage, charging in, closed the lid, sealing it completely. Thus, despite the loss of the 2 tail, they had captured this tailless beast, possessing special abilities. Combined with the potential gains the Kumagakure army could achieve once they crossed Hell Valley, Kumagakure had a winner on this occasion. However, at this moment, accompanied by an indifferent and cold voice from an elder, sage technique, transmission of distant shadows, emerald green chakra erupted from Uchiha's neck and shut out. Witnessing this sudden scene, the third Hokage paused, his gaze fixed. As this stream of chakra flowed out of his body, Uchiha Chi's expression changed instantly. He suddenly realized that he had lost control of his body. The dragon-like personality now possessed by the White Snake Sage was no longer the one that had once smitten the Uchiha with a single glance. Instead, it was Uchiha Chi who was being consumed. Then, driven by this stream of chakra, the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration uncontrollably activated. As if breaking free of its limits, the last shred of life force forcibly locked within the immortal body was squeezed out, then compressed into chakra that gathered in the empty chest. Strands of flesh and blood rapidly formed a brand new heart. The next moment, the green chakra suddenly transformed into the phantom of a giant white-scaled snake. It bit through the flesh surrounding the newly formed heart and devoured it. Then, using the amber bottle's powerful suction, it unhesitatingly broke free from Uchiha Chi's body and flew outward, wrapping itself around Zero Tail, which was being pulled into the amber bottle. The giant white-scaled snake then opened its maw and swallowed both Zero Tail and Uchiha Chi's heart in one gulp. At this moment, with Uchiha Chi's heart as its core, the white-scaled snake as its vessel, and Zero Tail as its source of power, a new Zero Tail Jinchuriki, controlled by the White Snake Sage who had devoured his dragon form, was born. The ethereal form of the giant white-scaled snake gradually expanded, shedding its white scales. Black and red flesh burst forth from within, transforming into the complete form of Zero Tail, as gigantic as a double-decker bus. Ha! I've got it, a flicker of triumph shone in the white snake immortal's eyes. He decisively severed a section of his tail and, using his unique magical technique, transformation, transformed the severed tail into the full form of Zero Tail, which flew towards the amber bottle. This illusion, conjured by the immortal, was so powerful that it even managed to confuse the artifact, rendering the amber bottle momentarily unable to distinguish which Zero Tail was the true form. Seizing this opportunity, the white snake immortal immediately broke free from the amber bottle's pull, slithering its massive body towards the south of Hell Valley. From the south of Hell Valley, crossing the four kingdoms of field, waterfall, grass, and rain, one could reach the kingdom of wind, where the dragon vein lay. Thus, while he hadn't obtained the Mangekyo Sharingan, the white snake immortal had already achieved much of his plan. However, at this moment, on the side of the Hell Valley cliff, a spiky-haired young man gritted his teeth and leaped out of the dense forest. Seeing the word zero light up in his hand, he no longer hesitated. He decisively grabbed his left wrist, causing the zero on his palm to transform into the word zero. Trembling, he shouted at the white snake sage, Hokage-style ear obedience technique, Kuon Ruiyu Chuisho. As this childish voice fell, the white snake sage's body suddenly stiffened. Then, the first Hokage necklace that had fallen on Uchiha Chi's abdomen suddenly burst into a dazzling burst of light. Green beams of light flew out from the necklace, wrapping around the white snake sage's body, pinning him to the ground, and he kept wiggling his snake body and struggling. Immediately afterwards, under Orochimaru's remote control, Yamato clasped his hands together before the white snake sage. Sage technique, transmitting the distant shadow, with the power of the ninja god, Senju Hashirama, he pinned the white snake sage down. As he was immobilized, another chakra suddenly surged from the Zero Tail's body, another consciousness. It was the seal formed by Hashirama's cells, implanted within the Zero Tails by Orochimaru. He had hidden his soul within it, waiting to deliver the final blow to the white snake sage. Suddenly, the white snake sage was startled and shouted in anger, Orochimaru, how dare you plot against me? On the other side of the battlefield, various tactics were unleashed one after another, and countless calculations were made. Uchiha Chi felt exhausted. Regardless of the other side's rules, one thing was certain, as the Jinchuriki, he had lost his tailed beast. With the tailed beast removed, his death was already inevitable. Coupled with the Zero Tail's removal, the loss of chakra supply and the final barrier of his immortality began to crumble. If it weren't for his tailed beast physique, he'd have likely ended up like the two wooden figures, their heads snapped off, their bodies landing somewhere on the battlefield. Even so, at that moment, Uchiha Chi felt his body grow heavier, his consciousness blurring. It was as if a valve, impossible to close, had been opened, and something incredibly important was slipping away from his shattered body. Hoo-hoo, he gasped, his face pale. With some effort, he raised his palms, propped himself up on the ground, and rolled over, landing flat on his back. He then tried to push himself up, but then, cough, cough, Uchiha violently vomited blood, gnashing his teeth as a wave of resentment washed over him. This body had reached its limit. That long, yet short, night, he battled 3 cage-level masters in quick succession. First, he slew the 2 tails Jinchuriki right in front of Killer Bee, then chased the 8 tails, then engaged in a passionate melee with the 3rd Raikage, AI. Finally, a single Kirin blast blasted the tailed beast ball, leaving the 8 tails Jinchuriki lying dead. To achieve this, Uchiha honestly couldn't understand. What had sustained him to this point? What was his purpose? Even in this desperate situation, he still refused to give up? And now, with everything lost, what else could he do? Bang! Even the strength to support himself with his palms drained away through the hollowness of his abdomen. Uchiha collapsed to the ground, straining his neck to look at Killer Bee, blasted to charcoal mass just a few feet away. That's right, he still needed to rely on this birdman to threaten the 3rd Raikage. Unsure where he'd gotten his strength, Uchiha reached for the torn ninja tool bag hanging from his waist. Shakily, he pulled a kunai from the hole and thrust it at Killer Bee's throat. But just then, he heard heavy footsteps. He strained to look up, but all he could see was a pair of red and white Kumagakure leggings steadily approaching him. Then, an elderly voice, half regretful and half indifferent, echoed in his ears. It was the 3rd Raikage AI. You're truly difficult to kill. AI let out a deep breath and glanced to the side, where a fierce struggle for control of his body raged. 3 consciousnesses alternated, yet the white snake sage still held the upper hand, while Zero Tail retreated ever further. He didn't head in that direction to claim Zero Tail's final possession. But he turned his head and took heavy steps, walking steadily towards Uchiha, who was lying on the ground in a mess. Although the ending is a little off, it doesn't matter, I don't mind getting my hands stained with more blood, Uchiha. It's over. With each step he took, the lightning on his body shone brighter. Finally, he raised his hand knife, gathered his fingers, and used the hell thrust, one-handed hand to suddenly point at the Konoha ninjas who had been standing beside Uchiha at some point. Most of them were trembling with fear, but they refused to retreat. Uchiha Setsuna, Aburame Ryoma, Aburame Shiguro, Hyuga Hizashi, Hyuga Kenji. Chapter 266 Intermission, Falling into Hell. As this group, who hadn't even lived to see the start of the original story, stood beside him, Uchiha, sensing something, raised his head with difficulty. He saw a thin, resolute old man step forward with his sword drawn, shielding him behind him. Grand Elder, Uchiha froze, a wave of panic brewing within him. Uchiha Setsuna didn't even turn, suppressing his fatigue and speaking calmly, "See, you've done enough." Wait, Uchiha couldn't hear what the other man said, but he gritted his teeth and stared at the old man before him, eyes widening. Uchiha Setsuna, having awakened his main Gekkai Sharingan but forgotten his unique eye technique, Heaven's Perpetual Standing, and permanently blinded in one eye by the use of Izanagi, couldn't unleash the legendary 3rd power, Susanoo. Even in skeletal form. Even though the main Gekkai Sharingan had increased his illusions, chakra capacity, and insight, it only allowed him to barely reach the 1st level of Cage, making it difficult for him to deal with masters like Kakuzu. And yet, this old man stood before him, facing the 3rd Raikage, the pinnacle of Cage power. The only thing he could use was that technique. Grand Elder, you, Uchiha wanted to persuade the other party, just leave him like this, leave here, wait a little longer, someone will come to rescue you. However, Uchiha Setsuna interrupted him without looking back. You should still remember what I said in the volcano. I once said, you are determined and have a long-term vision. Compared with mediocre people like me, you have more hope of reaching the other side and are more capable of taking on the responsibility of the clan. You are more qualified to live, and now, you can do these things, and the last thing I want to teach you is, Uchiha Setsuna took a long breath, his one eye fell on the 3rd Raikage, he tightly gripped the longsword in his hand, and shouted, the real victory is not to defeat the strong, but to protect what is important to you until the last moment. This is victory. The moment the words fell, flames and thunder roared at the same time. Blazing flames lit up the entire night sky. Uchiha Setsuna ignited his heart and the longsword in his hand. Fire style, chakra mode, activated. He stepped forward, raised the sword to his chest, and suddenly thrust forward. Boom. The longsword instantly transformed into a flaming longsword like a heavy hammer, extending its blade forward wildly, and fiercely stabbed at the 3rd Raikage, who was charging at him with hell thrust, one-handed. In the process, Uchiha Setsuna's longsword melted in an instant, and he immediately formed hand seals with both hands. Maui High. Forbidden Jutsu, Izanagi, activated. Fire Style, Chakra Mode. This technique can unleash the power of a kage even in an ordinary body, but that doesn't mean it can defeat a kage. To put it bluntly, this is a forbidden technique that trades life for attack power, and it also has a limit. Uchiha Chi had just demonstrated this limit. The Raikage could defeat this technique with just the Hell Thrust, Nihon Kenjutsu, combined with his unique Black Thunder. Now, facing a more powerful Nihon Kenjutsu, Uchiha Setsuna's flaming sword was instantly pierced and shattered, transforming into 4 streams of flame that streaked through AI's body. AI, only slightly affected, slowed down slightly, before charging forward with a swift thrust. With a swoosh, the lightning gathered at his fingertips instantly pierced Uchiha Setsuna's chest. Witnessing this scene, even though he knew the old man had already used Izanagi and wouldn't die from the blow, Uchiha Chi couldn't help but clench his fist tightly. At this moment, Uchiha Setsuna stared intently at AI, who was so close at hand, with a fierce, cold expression. Now, attack. The next moment, using his flesh and blood to block the third Raikage's attack, the Konoha ninja standing nearby attacked without hesitation. 8 trigrams Void Palm. 2 Hyuga ninjas simultaneously unleashed the 8 trigrams Void Palm, combining it into powerful 8 trigrams Void Palm capable of repelling even the 10 Tails attack. Instantly, a powerful air cannon slammed into the Raikage, halting his momentum. Immediately afterwards, a succession of ninjas, each wearing a Konoha Jounin vest and black lining, leaped out. 8 trigrams, Shattering Mountain Strike, Konoha Dragon God, Secret Technique, Mushroom Swamp, Secret Technique, Mushroom Spear. In an instant, Hisashi, the first to unleash the 8 trigrams palm, Shattering Mountain Strike, harnessed his chakra to unleash a powerful attack like a giant laser beam, piercing AI's chest first. Is this acupressure? Soft Fist Technique. AI was startled. The force of the blow even penetrated the lightning armor, impacting directly on his body. It also struck the Shiachi acupoint beside the large hole in his left chest, causing a ripple in the lightning armor within that area, significantly weakening it. Immediately afterwards, Aburain Ryoma's long-awaited secret technique, Insect Swamp, suddenly rose up and tightly entangled the Raikage's limbs. A powerful sidekick from Teacher Chen, the Konoha Dragon God, struck the weakened lightning armor on his left chest again. Lightning flashed and exploded, creating a brief gap in the third Raikage's chest armor. Make sure you hit it. Go, insects. Aburaim Shiguro gritted her teeth, stood still, and formed the way seal with both hands. She condensed nano-poisonous insects into the secret technique, Insect Spear. Like a spiral thorn, the insect spear pierced Uchiha Setsuna's chest and, unabated, shot towards the third Raikage's heart. The third Raikage eyes gaze fixed, his heart leaping as a strong sense of danger surged over him. This combined attack was so swift and so tightly coordinated, it was obvious he'd come prepared. While he was clashing with Uchiha Chi, it seemed they'd been busy too, and now they'd actually come up with a plan that could threaten him. However, lightning release, black spots, AI roared, and his body suddenly erupted in a riot of jet black, panther-shaped lightning. This was the transformation of lightning release achieved when it reached its peak, similar to the purple lightning developed by the future 6th Hokage, Kakashi, after losing his Sharingan. Its power far surpassed that of ordinary lightning release. Instantly, black lightning spread indiscriminately in all directions, shattering the insect spear near the gap in his chest's lightning armor, pulverizing it into dust. At that moment, all the attacking Konoha ninjas were blown away and thrown heavily. However, at this moment, Uchiha Setsuna, whose chest had been pierced by AI's finger, suddenly vanished into thin air. This was the forbidden technique, Izanagi. This forbidden eye technique, performed at the cost of an eye, allows the caster to continuously rewrite reality for a period of time, rendering all unfavorable events into non-existence, preserving only those that benefit them, thus rendering them invincible. This technique wasn't like the anime version of Shimura Danzos, where one eye equals one life. While Izanagi was active, the caster actually had unlimited resurrection coins. At this moment, Uchiha Setsuna's face was grim. He slipped from the gap between fantasy and reality, leaping past a lightning pillar of lightning release, black spot, and suddenly appeared before the third Raikage. He raised his palm, pressing a condensed, blazing white sword into AI's heart. He's not dead yet. AI's pupils shrank, not even considering why the old man before him was still alive. Pa. His hands, gleaming with lightning, suddenly clasped the blazing white sword, halting its momentum. He then spun sideways and, with a single blow, sliced the old man's head apart. The next moment, Uchiha Setsuna suddenly vanished, only to reappear. However, without the other Konoha ninjas to create opportunities for him, even with his resurrection, Uchiha Setsuna could no longer deliver a fatal blow against a third Hokage. He could only harass him. But for Uchiha Setsuna, this was enough. His goal was to keep the opponent from approaching Uchiha Chi until the very last moment. For a moment, the situation on the field reached a stalemate, and the third Hokage had to guard against the repeated deaths and reappearances of Uchiha Setsuna. After all, the blazing white sword, a replica of Uchiha Chi's, could indeed pose a threat to his ultimate lightning release armor. At that moment, a flash of blue lightning suddenly appeared in the sky, followed by a roar of thunder. Amidst the gloomy skies, rain suddenly began to fall. Bean-sized raindrops pelted down, pattering across the charred ruins, a sound like resentment, longing, a lament, evoking a sense of melancholy. Watching the unfolding scenes, Uchiha Chi's eyes couldn't help but flicker with despair. The forbidden technique, Izanagi, has a time limit. This invincibility lasts for different individuals. In the future, Shimura Danzo, with 10 Sharingan transplants and Hashirama cells, could extend his Izanagi power for 1 minute per Sharingan, while Uchiha Obito could last 5 minutes. And without the power of the Senju clan, how much longer could Uchiha Setsuna's main Gekyo Sharingan last? When the timer expired, they would all perish. And Minato still had over 10 minutes to spare before his promised arrival time of half an hour. All of this was in vain. He couldn't understand why this old man would go to such lengths for such a futile endeavor. Uchiha Chi mentally counted the seconds, his gaze gradually becoming dull, his expression growing numb. He watched Uchiha Setsuna charge forward, only to be swatted away like a fly. At that moment, what welled up from his heart wasn't anger or sadness, but despair. Layer upon layer, a thick, boundless weight that chilled his heart and body, leaving him with a suffocating feeling. He felt a sense of emptiness and despair all around him, isolated and helpless. Crack! Suddenly, the sky flashed, a pale flash of lightning flooded the world. Suddenly, the ears of the Konoha ninjas rang with the sound of footsteps. Trample, tramp, feet crushed the sand, stirring up a gray mist. Moonlight streamed down, accompanied by a giant sword piercing the sky. Those lying on the ground, unable to stand, struggled to raise their heads and saw, in the moonlight, a tall man with a pair of luminous green eyes, wearing a black robe and a forehead protector worn by a Tokigakure renegade ninja, a black mask, and a body-covering black robe, slowly approached. Seeing his attire, everyone's heart sank even deeper. This man was none other than Kakuzu, the Tokigakure renegade ninja, captured and imprisoned in the Uchiha clan's camp. He was the S-rank Tokigakure renegade ninja, the ninja world's most powerful bounty hunter. At this moment, AI, who was locked in a fierce battle with Uchiha Setsuna, saw the newcomer and his pupils shrank. He immediately recognized him. During the First Shinobi World War, Tokigakure had collaborated with Kumagakure. At that time, Kakuzu still served Tokigakure, cooperating with Kumagakure's Kinkaku and Jinkaku to conquer numerous small nations. However, later, Kinkaku and Jinkaku launched a rebellion, and this fellow brazenly killed all the Tokigakure leaders, defected from the village, and mastered the secret technique that Kumagakure coveted, Earth Grudge, becoming a true Hokage-level warrior. After decades of separation, he had unexpectedly met him again at this juncture, when he had been severely injured by Uchiha Chi. Although he was confident that he could not underestimate the other party, today had already been full of surprises, and he did not want to let any more mishaps happen. Ai frowned and stared at the other person, Kakuzu. Kakuzu's eyes were cold and indifferent. He glanced at Uchiha Chi who was lying on the ground, and couldn't help revealing a sinister smile. Then, he slowly walked over and asked the Hokage faintly, "Hokage, does the previous employment still count?" Hearing this, Ai's mouth twitched slightly, and then he remembered that a month and a half ago, the elder Chiyo of Sands Village hired as S-class rebel ninja through the underground gold exchange to cooperate with their Cloud Village to attack the reinforcement team from Konoha, but was later captured by the Uchiha clan. And now seeing that the other party is in a good condition with good food and drink, and no injuries, it seems that there seems to be some tricks in his capture. This money-loving guy seems to have been waiting for this moment to blackmail him. As soon as he thought of this, Aisu narrowed his eyes, staring at Kakuzu, and dodged a giant sword swung by Uchiha Setsuna with a big jump, and then shouted in a deep voice, "Kakuzu, you don't need to do anything. What Sand Village gives you, I will also give you. Now, get out of here." Tisk, that won't do. Kakuzu kept walking, squinting his eyes, and approached. Take money from people and help them eliminate disasters. This is the code of our profession. Then, he said quietly, but, having said that, this kid's life is worth 60 million taels. The gold exchange promised to give me 30 million taels, plus this 60 million taels. That's 90 million taels. It's more than the 60 million you want to give? Rickage, let me calculate. If I take this kid away from here, how much will the Uchiha clan pay me? Will it be more than 90 million? Hearing this, AI, understanding the man's lip movements and realizing that this bounty-collecting ninja, devoid of integrity, might actually be capable of such a travesty, couldn't help but frown. He immediately threatened, "If you're not afraid of death, you can try." Faced with this threat, Kakuzu narrowed his eyes, as if weighing the pros and cons. After a moment, he said quietly, "Rickage, you're joking. How could I possibly do such a thing?" Then, his expression changed, and he spoke calmly, "I can help you kill that brat. After you do it, I'll exchange it for 60 million from Kinsho, 30 million from Tsunagakure, and 60 million from you. I want it all." Kakuzu paused, narrowing his eyes, his tone drawn out. "Otherwise, HMPH, AI snorted coldly at this harsh demand, but he didn't object. Receiving the answer he wanted, Kakuzu's eyes narrowed slightly. The next moment, he leaped forward and lunged. The Konoha ninjas watched in horror and fury, their eyes bloodshot, yet no one was able to stop the enemy. The thumping sound of rapid, drum-like footsteps hitting the ground startled Uchiha Chi, who was counting the minutes. He suddenly looked up, and his silent count had reached exactly 3 minutes. Then, he saw Uchiha Setsuna, wielding a flaming sword that pierced the heavens and earth. His crimson three-magatama Sharingan suddenly turned to a blank, pale white. Then, as if a string had snapped completely, like a flaming bird losing its wings, a falcon falling from the sky, Uchiha Setsuna plummeted from mid-air, and was then grabbed by the throat by the third Raikage. At that moment, Uchiha Chi opened his mouth slightly and felt 2 lines of moist, rusty liquid drip from the corners of his eyes, falling to the ground along his jaw. He could hear nothing, his vision blurring. He could only sense his facial features distorting, becoming hideous and terrifying. His nostrils and mouth felt as acrid as smoke, and his brain felt swollen with blood, nearly exploding. His eyes, darkened by the loss of chakra, were suddenly crimson, connected by veins. 2 Magatama spheres spun wildly around his dark pupils. Power surged from every part of his body. However, at that moment, a hand suddenly twisted Uchiha Chi's head, lifting him up completely, allowing Uchiha Chi to clearly see the hand's owner. Kakuzu. Uchiha Chi was startled, and then he saw Kakuzu's other hand rapidly approaching. Puff. Blood splattered. The index finger and thumb plunged straight into his eye socket, the diamond-hard fingers crushing his brow bone before piercing his eye. I could only feel countless sharp objects piercing my body, and the hands that were twisting my hair suddenly loosened. Then, there was an endless, nightmare-like feeling of falling. Chapter 267, The Incomplete Body of the Ten Tails, the Eternal Sky. In this world, where there is light, there is also shadow. As long as there is a concept of winners, there are bound to be losers. The selfish desire to maintain peace leads to war, and hatred is born to protect love. Just like now, a gaze fell on the face of the young man who fell off the cliff. Looking at the twisted, hideous, terrifying, and sinister expression that seemed to want to destroy everything, an old man in a dark blue robe and withered white hair stood on the side of the cliff and watched all this unfold indifferently. It's like the 2 sides of a coin. To protect something, the other must be sacrificed. When a person learns to love, he must take the risk of hatred, and the Uchiha clan is destined for revenge. In the night, a cold and evil scarlet light suddenly lit up. Uchiha Chi, your story ends, then what's next? It will be up to you to inherit my name, Uchiha Madara, and bring true peace to this world. With his 0 tail stripped away, his immortal body breached, the white snake immortal ripped his heart out with a black tiger, and his throat pierced by his own sword, his body now riddled with fatal wounds, unable to activate the forbidden technique, flesh regeneration. Theoretically, even with his tailed beast physique, Uchiha Chi would have been dead by now. However, after Kokuzu gouged out his eyes, threw him off a cliff, and pierced his body with a dense swarm of earth-wrath tentacles, Uchiha Chi felt, despite the initial momentary pain, a warm, comfortable sensation as his blood began to flow again. And then, bang bang, bang bang, bang bang, bang bang. A new heart, shielded by the earth-wrath tentacles, was implanted in his chest and began to beat. At that moment, Uchiha Chi understood the meaning of Kokuzu's final words. Just as Uchiha Chi had kicked hidden off the cliff in front of Kokuzu, Kokuzu had chosen to act in order to save him in that situation. Unlike Uchiha Chi and the other Konoha ninjas tipped off by Ibure and Ryoma, he didn't know Namake's Minato was en route. From Kokuzu's perspective, if Uchiha Chi fell, everyone here would be killed by the third Hokage. Even attempting to take Uchiha Chi away would likely bring about his own death. Therefore, he could only save one person, even in such a cruel way. But what puzzled Uchiha Chi was why Kokuzu saved him. At this moment, the earth blade tentacles that had penetrated his body transformed into dense earth blade threads, clinging to the wounds and mending them. They eventually merged into the transparent hole in his chest, forming and transforming into flesh, blood vessels, and tissue, transporting the blood produced by this heart throughout his body. A ray of light seemed to appear in the silent darkness. Then, Uchiha Chi saw a row of subtitles constantly resetting before his eyes. Deng. You bravely confronted the two-tails Jinchuriki, Niyakujin, who attempted to kill you. They were unable to recover, and you received a critical hit. You gained a random skill from them, Fire Style, Fire Rat Ball, A, Mastery. Deng, you bravely confronted the tailed beast, Two-Tails Matatabiki, who underestimated you. You gained a random skill from them, Talent, Tailed Beast Physique, S. You bravely confronted the tailed beast, Eight-Tails Jayuki, who attempted to kill you. They were unable to recover, and you gained a random skill from them, Talent, Tailed Beast Physique, S. Reward, Critical Hit. Repeatedly gaining the Talent, Tailed Beast Physique, S. Stacks and upgrades, enhancing the effects of Tailed Beast Physique in all directions. You gain the higher level Talent, 10 Tails Body, S. Incomplete, 3/10, still missing 6 tailed beasts and the Outer Path Demon statue. Deng. You bravely confronted the third Hokage, who attempted to kill you, and gained a random skill from him, Hell Thrust, 4-point penetration, B, Mastery. Hell Thrust, 4-point penetration, B, Mastery. This is known as the strongest spear's ability. As the number of fingers decreases, the skill's form will advance to 3-point penetration, A, 2-point penetration, A+, and 1-point penetration, S, while the proficiency remains unchanged. Your heart steel level has increased. You obtained a new special equipment, Earth Heart, Earth, and gained the equipment added ninjutsu, Earth Style, Earth Splitting Needle, B, Earth Style, Earth Spear, B. Now that you have mastered the transformation of 5 attribute ninjutsu, you're equipped Earth Heart, Earth, combining all the properties of its original form, upgrades to Earth Heart, 5 essences. Special equipment, Earth Heart, 5 essences. This is the Earth Heart's ultimate form, unlocking the skill, Earth Heart, 5 essences, ultimate shot. In a split second, a whole new array of skills appeared on the skill bar, Fire Style, Fire Rat Ball, Hell Spike, 4-point penetrating hand, Earth Style, Earth Splitting Needle, Earth Style, Earth Spear, Earth Grudge, 5 styles, ultimate shot. And then there was the incomplete 10 tails body. The moment this physique was attached to Uchiha Chi, his death was instantly delayed. But then came an endless hunger and emptiness. Finally, exhausted from these endless battles, Uchiha Chi lost consciousness. Bang! The heavy object plummeted to the bottom of Hell Valley, sending up a shower of blood and dust. And just then, the sound of blades striking the ground echoed. As the blue fur danced, an old man with withered white hair, leaning on a sickle as a cane, stepped out from the cliff face and approached. He lowered his head slightly, his gaze fixed on Uchiha Chi, whose body had fallen to the bottom of the ravine and been shattered into pieces. HMPH, what a mess, little brat. With a sneer, the old man raised his bony arm and formed a way seal with one hand. As the seal formed, a white spore gradually rose on his shoulder, quickly expanding into a humanoid form. This was the spore jutsu, a physical clone technique of white setsu. Unlike ordinary clones, it persisted even after the death of the original body, nor did the clone's memories return to the original. Furthermore, it possessed a high degree of concealment, capable of absorbing the possessed person's chakra and transferring it to others. Madara-sama, White Zetsu had just taken shape and was about to greet the old man when a bony arm suddenly reached out, grasped his throat, and twisted it in the opposite direction. Crack! Uchiha Madara didn't need a living White Zetsu, he simply sought its unique qualities. A special ability called the impersonation technique. After absorbing chakra, White Zetsu could create a body, meridians, organs, and even chakra identical to the possessed person. This quality made White Zetsu, in Madara's eyes, perfectly suited for this scenario. He could harvest White Zetsu's tissue to repair Uchiha Chi's body. More crucially, Uchiha Madara didn't want White Zetsu's true form to know about this. He had already chosen a specific candidate, and he wanted Uchiha Chi to serve as a backup to ensure the success of his ultimate plan. At this point, he trusted no one but himself. After throwing the dead White Zetsu to the ground, Uchiha Madara pulled out a bottle filled with formaldehyde from beneath his robe. Within it, a pair of 3 Magatama Sharingan flickered. Then, Uchiha Madara pulled back another section of his robe, revealing a patch of pale skin on his chest. This was the flesh of Oshirama Senju, which Uchiha Madara had bitten off before dying at the Battle of the Valley of the End and then implanted within himself, forming the mask of Oshirama. Within it lay Oshirama's cells. Using the technique of impersonation to enhance his adaptability, employing the 3 Magatama Sharingan to cast I's energy to mitigate risk, and then integrating Oshirama's cells into his body, he would cultivate Uchiha Chi to the level Madara envisioned. This was what Madara was going to do. At this point, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but shake his head, glancing at the imp on the ground. It took that guy's sacrifice to unlock the 3 Magatama. What a poor aptitude. Well, after that, I'll get the eye back and kill that evil cult imp and that Kirigakure girl. That should be enough to achieve the Mangekyou. However, just as Uchiha Madara approached, opened the jar, removed the eyeball, peeled back the eyelids, and was about to replace Uchiha Chi's eyes with a new pair, his hands suddenly stopped, and his brows furrowed. Huh? This is a transcription seal. At that moment, Uchiha Chi's right eye, which had been peeled open, suddenly lit up with a scarlet light. An illusory Mangekyou Sharingan, like a vortex of time and space, appeared in his eye socket, and immediately activated its unique Mangekyou pupil technique, Heaven's Eternal Standing. Chapter 268, The Fusion of Eye Techniques and Bloodline. Eye Techniques eliminated. This is the Mangekyou Sharingan. Seeing the unexpected presence in Uchiha Chi's eyes, even a formidable figure like Uchiha Madara was slightly taken aback. I saw the brat's eyes gouged out with my own eyes, and he hasn't even evolved to the Mangekyou level. He pondered for a moment, then raised his head slightly, gazing up at the mirror-like cliff face. It was as if he saw a falling hawk, and saw the final choice made by the child who had admired him that night before leaving the village 45 years ago. After a long pause, Uchiha Madara sighed and paused. Has the cowardly, follow-the-herd brat finally found his courage? He slowly stood up, leaning on the handle of his sickle. He looked down at Uchiha Chi, who lay on the ground, uncertain whether he was alive or dead, and slowly closed his eyes. At that moment, a sudden roar echoed from the cliff again. With a flash of golden light, a deep, dark, and furious spiral wheel leaped from the cliff's edge. With a single blow, it shattered the endless clouds above. A huge full moon emerged from the night sky, its falling light bisected by the shadow of the cliff. The white line of moonlight cut the two men, sharply separating them. One half's clear light gently illuminated Uchiha Chi, who lay on the ground. Within the other half's deep, dark shadow, Uchiha Madara suddenly opened his crimson Sharingans. 3 pitch-black Magatama slowly rotated, intently gazing at the young man lying on the ground. Under the influence of the Mangekyou eye technique, eternal standing of the sky, all of Uchiha Chi's wounds, bloodstains, burns, the cut on his throat from the kunai, and the transparent hole in his chest, encircled by dense black lines, all began to regenerate and heal at that moment. Mangekyou eye technique, eternal standing of the sky. A book says, when the heaven and earth were first separated, there was a god born with them, and his name was Yan Chenglizun. It was the beginning of time. Its effect is that, 1 second before death, the state of the caster will slowly revert to 30 minutes ago. Moreover, only the facts that are favorable to the caster are preserved, and all unfavorable factors to the caster are transformed into never happening. This is a time-side eye technique, similar to Izanagi, but different from it. First of all, In terms of cost, the priority of this eye technique is higher than Izanagi, that is to say, even if Izanagi has already activated to make the caster blind, this can also be regarded as an unfavorable factor, which will directly reverse this unfavorable factor back to the state of not being blind 30 minutes ago. To put it simply, it is based on having unlimited resurrection coins for a period of time, and then adding a layer of CD refresh buff. When the eye technique is used in conjunction with the forbidden technique, in other words, it can also be called infinite Izanagi. It is precisely because of this jutsu's miraculous effects that Uchiha Setsuna has been able to survive countless incredible battles from the present to the distant past, including but not limited to the battle with Hashirama of the End Valley, the chaotic clash of dozens of Mangekyas, Indra's battle with Ashura, and the Six Path Sages' battle with Kaguya, ultimately escaping the gap between fantasy and reality. The price of this eye technique, besides the blindness that comes with using the Mangekyas, is forgetfulness. Secondly, in terms of preserving facts that benefit the caster, this jutsu has an even more unique effect. At this moment, after clearly seeing the condition within Uchiha Chi's body, Uchiha Madara couldn't help but raise an eyebrow slightly. Using the secret technique, Earth Grudge, to replace the impersonation technique, and this Mangekyo eye technique to replace Izanagi, coupled with some factors that even I haven't seen through, this brat actually possesses a physique that's on par with the fusion of White Zetsu, although it's still somewhat inferior to Hashirama's. Uchiha Madara slowly exhaled, looking at the moonlight line before him that separated him and Uchiha Chi like two worlds, and couldn't help but feel a little excited. Can it still continue to dance? Interesting, he pondered for a moment, then shook his head. However, it seems to be lacking some degree of skill, not enough to amaze and excite even this old man. However, at this moment, Miyajo, you beast, this old man will kill you. A terrifying blood dragon, 50 meters tall, circled in the air and descended with a frightened and angry roar. Boom, the surging scalding spring water drowned out the massacre taking place simultaneously within Hell Valley. The screams, wails, and curses echoing from the valley's depths, which Uchiha Madara had always ignored, finally came to an end. In his ears, only the endless blazing fire, the scorching sound of flowing flames stretching to the ends of his sight, and the echoing sound of everything pausing, the end of the slaughter. It's over. It's finally over. It's all over. In the distance, the flames illuminated a figure, as if finally liberated, laughing wildly with tears of blood. He roared in the depths of Hell Valley, "From this day forward, I will renounce this foolish surname and call myself Flame, Miyajo Flame. From this moment on, the Blood Pond clan, a family of Ijutsu heirlooms that once stood alongside the Uchiha in the ninja world, was annihilated." Soon, amidst the silence, a series of footsteps echoed. Tramp, tramp, crushing wildfires, treading on pools of blood, carrying mountains of corpses. Hearing this mournful, wild laughter, these footsteps that staggered like someone dragging a heavy object, Uchiha Madara, who hadn't smiled in ages, suddenly brightened up, a smile of strange amusement on his face. Interesting, the Blood Pond young chief, who decimated his entire clan, and the Uchiha young chief, who had lost everything, would meet here. Well, let me hear it again. The story of Uchiha Chi. Uchiha Madara chuckled, raised his scythe, and sheathed the bottle containing his Sharingan. A layer of phantom blue skeletal hands materialized around him, pulverizing the white Zetsu on the ground with a single blow. Then, he turned his back and slowly walked behind the scenes. Silence soon returned to the mirror-like cliff bottom. Not long after, a blood-stained figure stumbled, panting heavily, cradling a swaddle baby in one hand and a corpse in the other. He slowly approached, stepping over a pool of blood. His face was expressionless, as if he cared nothing, as if he saw nothing. Until, as he approached, he saw the young man lying in the pool of blood. He saw the expression of resentment, regret, anger, a twisted, hideous, and painful face. Miyashiro-en was stunned and stopped in front of the young man. In that moment, it was as if he were seeing through the young man himself. After his wife's suicide, he sat slumped at her door, his expression seemingly identical. After a moment of silence, he let out a breath and considered ignoring the dying boy, but his stumbling steps ruffled the boy's tattered clothes, revealing the red and white crest of the Uchiha clan. Is this guy an Uchiha? Gazing at the crest of the clan that had imprisoned him for 20 years, and then at the boy's two empty eye sockets, Miyashiro-en sneered for no apparent reason. Then, As if possessed by some incomprehensible force, he gouged out the eyes of the corpse he was carrying and roughly pressed them into Uchiha Chi's empty eye sockets. And they were a pair of blood dragon eyes. Having done all this, Miyashiro and dropped the corpse, picked up Uchiha Chi, and, holding his daughter in his arms, continued on his way. However, a strange smile spread across his face. It was a mad smile that blended madness, anger, liberation, and the joy of revenge. Did you know, when mortals attempt to touch the realm of the gods will bring down divine punishment, and we call it, the bloodline poison. Uchiha, from today on, you are on death row. Chapter 269 Kakuzu is not happy. Crushing coarse sand and rolling over gravel, Kakuzu, clad in a black robe that completely enveloped his body, walked across the endless, barren shores of the Frost Kingdom. All he saw was a lifeless, desolate landscape. Even the ocean, lapping against the shore in the distance, seemed lifeless. Yet, amidst this chaotic landscape of smaller nations, where even birds were too lazy to even shit, thrived a group of ninjas driven by the pursuit of wealth. Bounty ninjas. Until they walked into the underground gold exchange of the Frost Country hidden in this barren rocky beach. At this time, the conversation of two bounty ninjas who were drinking on the side could not help but fall into Kakuzu's ears. Have you heard the big things that happened a few days ago? Another bounty ninja picked up the wine glass, shook his head, and said with some emotion, of course I heard about it. This ninja world is getting more and more chaotic. In just one day, so many major events happened one after another. The battle for Hell Valley, the surprise attack on the hidden cloud village by the three ninjas Orochimaru, the inexplicable genocide of the Blood Pond clan, and the turmoil in the capital of the Land of Lightning, especially the battle in Hell Valley. I heard that even strategic weapons such as the tailed beast Jinchuriki were sent to the battlefield. It's just that the news is still blocked, and we don't know how the battle is going. However, if we can pick up the strong man on the bounty list on the edge of the battlefield, wow, you'll be rich. Hearing this, Kakuzu's eyes shook slightly for a moment, as if recalling something. A hint of sarcasm crossed his face, and he couldn't help but sneer. Because, in this war, there are no winners. Kumagakure sought to capture Hell Valley, even sending the third Raikage and two Jinchuriki. However, due to that Uchiha brat, the subsequent arrival of the Yellow Flash, and the mysterious annihilation of the Blood Pond clan, their efforts were thwarted, and they were forced to withdraw. Konoha's forces attempted to seize this opportunity to launch a surprise attack on Kumagakure village, but Orochimaru, leading the team, was severely injured by the village's secret weapon and retreated in disgrace. Even the Uchiha clan, at this thought, Kakuzu's face shone with a sneer, recalling the final words his hired Uchiha Huagwang had spoken to him that night, after he'd survived the furious Namokaze Minato. With your help, and the Great Elder's backup, Uchiha Chi might still have a chance of survival after falling off the cliff. We'll send people to conduct a thorough search at the bottom of the cliff. Haha. The thorough search only turned up news of the Blood Pond clan's annihilation, while their own young clan leader had inexplicably vanished. Losing two powerful pillars of strength overnight, the clan had become a complete joke. However, if one had to identify a winner in this battle, bang! Two heavy boxes slammed onto the counter. The buttons of one box were undone by the bald, bearded man before him, revealing stacks of large green banknotes. Mr. Kakuzu, the 60 million bounty, plus an additional 30 million from the Sand Village, the 60 million sent urgently from the Land of Lightning, and a large sum secretly sent from the Land of Fire, after deducting the handling fee. It's all here. The bald man smiled a mercenary smile, his eyes unable to resist glancing at the even larger, unopened cash box on the other side. Compared to the previous three, this one contained a truly terrifying amount of money. You truly are the strongest bounty collecting ninja. This is our biggest deal yet. The exchange looks forward to continuing your cooperation. Oh, Kakuzu simply nodded indifferently at the enthusiasm of the underground exchange boss. Then, he picked up the two heavy cash boxes and turned to leave. That's right, the only winner in this war was Kakuzu. By killing a brat he already disliked, he had earned 4 huge bounties from Sand Village, Kumagakure, the Uchiha clan, and the underground exchange. It was truly a one fish for kill. But, Mr. Kakuzu, aren't you going to count it? Seeing Kakuzu simply pick up the money and walk away, so briskly, like a completely different person, the bald man couldn't help but pause, a little confused. In the past, Kakuzu would stay right here with him for the better part of a day, first counting each bill, making sure there weren't any detonating tags mixed in, then checking the bills to make sure every single amount was worth spending. He was incredibly meticulous. But what was going on today? Kokuzu was silent for a moment after being called, then turned around and stared coldly at the bald man in front of him. Anything else? No. Looking at the cold eyes that seemed to indicate that he would rob the underground gold exchange here and kill everyone present if they disagreed with him, the bald man couldn't help swallowing his saliva, and then a flattering smile appeared on his face. I just want to ask you, will you sell the Sharingan of the young patriarch of the Uchiha clan? Hearing this, Kokuzu frowned and sneered. Why, you dare to touch the tiger's whiskers of the Uchiha clan? Don't you think enough of your people have died? The bald man chuckled. This is a different time. Now the Uchiha clan's decline is already apparent. First, the young patriarch of this clan disappeared, and then the highly respected elder Uchiha Setsuna was also heard to have died in the battle the day before yesterday. They're all busy with their own affairs, so why would they care about us, the rats in the gutter? Hearing this, Kokuzu couldn't help but sneer. You gather intelligence quite quickly. It's my old trade, after all. Even if I haven't been a spy for years, some habits still stick. The bald man smiled faintly and continued, Mr. Kokuzu, I have a connection with a nobleman from the land of water. I'll give you a price for these eyes. He looked at Kokuzu with a smile, raised a finger, and waved it at him. He was sure that the money-loving Kokuzu would absolutely not refuse this offer. And he, in turn, could earn nearly 10 million in commissions from this resale. But the next moment, bang! Snap! Kokuzu, expressionless, grasped the finger and twisted it back against the joint. Bone splinters pierced, blood spurting out. Hearing this shrill sound at the bar, the bounty-earning ninjas shuddered, subconsciously alert, and glanced towards the counter. At this moment, Kokuzu said indifferently, not for sale. Hiss. The bald man trembled in pain, but he maintained a professional smile and said with a trembling fake smile, I understand, Kokuzu-sen. He threw his broken, crushed finger into the stinking rotting matter in the corner. Kokuzu snorted coldly, picked up the money box that had fallen to the ground again, and turned away. But then, the bald man, enduring the excruciating pain, hissed in pain, saying, Kokuzu-sen, wait, there's another reward you might be interested in. In the capital of the Land of Lightning, the daimyo of the Land of Lightning, who was assassinated in the capital the other day, has increased the reward again, raising the base to 30 million ryo, and the person offering the reward is the leader of the undead evil who continues to cause chaos in the capital of the Land of Lightning, Uchiha Chi. Upon hearing this news, Kokuzu narrowed his eyes slightly, then, as if ignoring it, silently carried the two huge money boxes and walked out of the money exchange. Only when he once again saw the desolate, rocky beach before him did Kokuzu raise his hand, gazing at the pool of blood on his black glove. For some reason, he let out a deep breath. True, he had made a fortune. But seeing the crowds of people madly mourning and reveling over the Uchiha brat who had fallen off a cliff and was probably a shattered mess, he somehow felt no joy. He quickly pushed the inexplicable emotion aside. After determining his direction, Kokuzu set off southeast along the eastern coast of the Frost Kingdom. That direction, the capital of the Lightning Kingdom, Yunming City. Chapter 270 Scorpion, Sir, times have changed. Only after Kokuzu left did the oppressive atmosphere in the Frost Country's underground gold exchange finally ease. The bounty ninjas, who had been terrified to breathe, finally breathed a sigh of relief. I was so scared. How could he walk so quietly? I didn't even notice he was coming. Thankfully, I didn't say anything that would offend him. Otherwise, we'd all be dead here today. One bounty ninja patted his chest, his heart still trembling. Those in the bounty ninja world knew Kokuzu's reputation well. He would kill any teammate, any passerby, even the gold exchange clerk if he even slightly displeased him. Who said it wasn't? The bounty ninja sitting opposite him also had a look of fear on his face. But, what happened to the young patriarch of the Uchiha clan? Didn't I hear that guy fell from the cliff of Hell Valley? Besides, that's Hell Valley. The lowest cliff is nearly 1,000 meters high. Even for a genin with abundant chakra, it would be very difficult to survive if he fell from that terrain. What's more, I heard that guy had a hand-to-hand fight with a tailed beast Jinchuriki, and his chakra was exhausted, his eyes were gouged out by Kokuzu, and he was fatally injured. In that situation, he should have been dead. Why is he being treated as missing? Another bounty ninja shook his head. The news came from Kumagakure. Who knows what happened in that battle? Hey, Maybe the third Hokage went to Hell Valley otherwise. How could Kumagakure even have its village destroyed this time? The news is too confusing now. However, I heard that many people are rushing to the capital of the Land of Lightning, Kumoming City. I think everyone wants to know whether the only Uchiha still alive and kicking in the world is the real thing. In the corner of the gold exchange, there was a figure wearing a high-collared black robe and a hood that covered his entire face, with only a few wisps of red hair falling. At this moment, he was squinting his eyes slightly, looking in the direction where Kikuzu left, listening to the whispers of the group of bounty ninjas in his ears. Then, the corners of his mouth curled up, revealing a smile. Yunming City, the flickering candlelight on the table illuminated half of his face. This person was actually the culprit who killed the third Kazakage and ignited the fuse of the third Shinobi World War, the genius puppeteer of the Sand Village, Scorpion of the Red Sand. After rushing all the way from the Land of Wind to the Land of Hot Water, according to his original plan, he should have participated in the Battle of Hell Valley. However, along the way, he stumbled upon the strange movements of a group of Konoha ninjas. Curious, he followed them all the way to the hidden cloud village in the Land of Lightning. Then, the night before yesterday, he witnessed a truly spectacular scene in the hidden cloud village. And something imbued with artistic flair. A chakra cannon with 3 barrels, with only one ignited, blasting both heads of the Yamata no Orochi. A terrifying thing that could only be wielded by the power of human life. Relying on traditional kunai and ninja tools, which constantly wear out, is utterly boring and doesn't align with the timeless beauty I seek. Thinking of the scene he'd witnessed the day before, Scorpion shook his head. Then, from beneath his black robe, he pulled out a truly revolutionary object, a weapon resembling a flintlock pistol. The difference was that a crystal-clear blue chakra core, forged from a human body, replaced a flint. An anvil sat beside the firing port. When the trigger was pulled, the spring impacted the chakra core, unleashing a chakra beam far more powerful than a typical gunpowder detonator. Just right now. Scorpion silently stood up, drew his pistol, and aimed it at the bald man standing at the bar, wiping glasses with a bewildered expression. Then, he pulled the trigger, and the chakra core ignited. Bang! The sound of the gun rang out. The next moment, a bloody hole appeared in the bald man's forehead, and he collapsed, his expression dazed. Sure enough, compared to ninja tools like kunai, this thing is more effective. From 7 steps away, the light bullet is fast, but from 7 steps away, it's even faster. Then, he turned the gun, aimed at the bounty ninjas who hadn't reacted yet, and pulled the trigger again. Bang! Purple smoke exploded, quickly enveloping the entire basement. You can also mix chakra toxins with wind attribute chakra cores and integrate them into the light bullets to cause area of effect damage. Faces filled with horror, the bounty ninjas who inhaled the poisonous mist vomited blood and collapsed. Standing among the corpses, Scorpion looked at the dull, cracked chakra core at the end of his hand cannon and shook his head. It can still be improved in power. Aside from being a bit draining, it has few drawbacks. However, if we can find an infinitely self-healing chakra core forged from a human body, it could barely be called a work of art. Lifting a corpse, Scorpion sheathed his hand cannon and pulled a handsaw from his black robe. He sliced open the bounty ninja's abdomen with a single cut, then pressed his hand into it, mummifying the body with a human puppetry technique, chakra core. He extracted a massive amount of chakra, focusing it on the abdomen for further refinement. Finally, he pulled out more brand new, crystal clear, blood-stained chakra core. The ninja's life was reflected in this beautiful, yet sinister crystal. Scorpion, not bothering to wipe the blood from his face, gazed at it with a lost gaze before pocketing it and returning to work. Next, he would transmute these corpses one by one to replenish his reserves, and then completely plunder this underground gold exchange. After all, pursuing art was quite expensive. As for the infinite self-healing chakra cores that could be transmigrated from human bodies, although the original target, Uchiha Chi, had disappeared, wasn't there another Uchiha Chi in the capital of the Land of Lightning? After killing everyone in the gold exchange and looting everything, Scorpion twisted his tired neck and walked out of the gold exchange, stepping through a pool of blood. The sunlight on the Frost Country coast was dazzling yet warm, causing his amber eyes to narrow. A hooded ninja who had been waiting outside saw Scorpion come out and quickly approached, handing him a report. Master Scorpion, the results of the investigation into Uchiha Chi in Yunming City are out. Oh, Scorpion took it casually and examined it carefully. So, this Uchiha Chi was a subordinate that Uchiha Chi took in the Land of Hot Water. So they're operating under his name, the genius who experienced the ultimate test of the evil god together and, like Uchiha Chi, gained immortality is called, hidden. Scorpion paused, considering, before nodding. Although not as good as Uchiha Chi, it's barely adequate as a work of art. Moreover, if the real Uchiha is not dead, he will definitely not sit idly by after knowing this news. Scorpion smiled slightly, his amber eyes fixed, and he said with certainty, he will appear in Yunming City. The turban ninja was slightly stunned and raised his head. Then what does the master mean? Spread this news and gather all those who are interested in Uchiha Chi. Scorpion sneered, I will turn this place into my hunting ground. Scorpion still felt a little regretful because he witnessed the collapse of the hidden cloud village and did not catch up with the fierce battle of Hell Knight. But it doesn't matter. He will gather this group of people again, and then hunt them one by one. Make them into perfect collection. Go, I have to hurry too. He threw a stack of banknotes into the hands of the turban ninja and sent him away to do his work. Scorpion identified the direction and walked towards Yunming City. At this time, on the road ahead of Scorpion, in a dilapidated town in the Frost Kingdom, a young man holding a baby in one hand and dragging a boy with a black cloth covering his eyes, who looked like a corpse, stopped in front of the city gate. If you are listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means it was downloaded and re-uploaded without effort. We warmly invite you to visit our channel, Fanfic World. There you will find the original version of this story and many other novels of various genres. We look forward to seeing you dive into a world of incredible novels. Chapter 271 Breaking the Limits and Achieving High Technique Bloodline Elimination. In the Frost Kingdom, at night, a dilapidated coastal town lies. Following the recent advance of the Kumagakure army, this town, situated on the main route from the Land of Lightning to the Land of Hot Water, has been reduced to its present state. It is dilapidated, desolate, and utterly silent. Long spider webs spun from the shop signs lining the street, their valuables having been looted, leaving only a few worthless trinkets scattered cluttered across the ground. Desolate, only seabirds hopped above the ground, then fluttered their wings to soar atop telephone poles, their heads tilted, their pupils reflecting the distant visitors. And just then, hunger forced Uchiha Chi to wake up. This waking sensation was peculiar. He could see nothing, yet it felt as if he could see everything. Touch, smell, hearing, and taste, the four senses of perception, combined in a unique rhythm to paint a picture of the world within his senses. This was his evolved combat intuition, let's call it, mind's eye. Uchiha Chi could clearly feel himself being dragged backwards along the silent street. His tugger didn't care if he bumped into anything or got hurt. Fortunately, the tattered inner armor he wore was durable, scraping against the ground with a hissing sound. Yes, Uchiha Chi remembered, his eyes had been gouged out, hence his loss of sight. But Uchiha Chi couldn't help but grit his teeth. Now, what about these eyes in my eye sockets? And why did it feel like there were two pairs of eyes in them? Four eyes? How should I put it? This feeling was strange. Uchiha Chi could sense his lost Sharingan eyes reappearing in their sockets, a translucent, illusory form. If it weren't for these special eyes inserted into his eye sockets, his Sharingan would have materialized and reappeared in their sockets. This was precisely the effect of the Mangekyo Jutsu, Heaven's eternal standing. Having one's eyes gouged out was a disadvantage for the caster, but the technique's effects would forcibly reverse that, creating an identical pair of Sharingan in time and returning them. 30 minutes before the technique was activated, Uchiha Chi hadn't lost his eyes. But now, his own Sharingan was merging with the eyes tucked into their sockets. However, Uchiha Chi felt that calling it fusion was a stretch, it was more like devouring. His three Magatama Sharingan was devouring the eyes known as the Blood Dragon Eyes, feeding on them. Evolving towards an unknown, powerful, even wilder direction than the Mangekyo Sharingan. It was devouring the eye's fibrous membrane, vascular membrane, retina, iris, aqueous humor, lens, and vitreous humor in every possible way, extracting the essence and discarding the dregs. At a deeper level, within the fundamental structure and properties of life, within the sequences of genetic genes, within molecules, atoms, neutrons, and even more minute objects, there is a constant collision, exchange of fire, gnawing, and devouring. Of course, there will be failures in counter-devourment, but new organizations will be reborn under the effects of the Mangekyo Jutsu, Tenno-jo-sama. Then, they will regroup in this evolutionary battle, one after another, charging forward once more. This is an existential war based on primal, savage instincts. It is an evolution born of coincidence, destined for success. And this is exactly what Tennojo-sama described, preserving all results that benefit the caster. Uchiha Chi seemed to understand something. At this moment, he was awakening to a brand new Dojutsu, beyond the imagination of anyone in the entire ninja world. It was the Dojutsu Kekkei-kun, the evolutionary result of the collision of two Dojutsu Kekkei-kun. And at this moment, he also understood what Kekkei-kun was all about. The answer to the so-called Kekkei-kun was already written on the surface of the mystery. It was a process of elimination between Kekkei-kun. The strong exploit the weak, devouring them to strengthen themselves. The weak unite into an army, like ants devouring an elephant, and after defeating the strong, they become even stronger. The last survivor will break through the limits and achieve bloodline elimination. No wonder Inoki's dust release is so incredible, capable of disintegrating a human being at the molecular level and even shredding Susanoo with ease. Uchiha Chi couldn't help but feel a sense of anticipation. The blood dragon eye's evolutionary path and even its effects are very similar to the Sharingan. Both are illusion eyes. When the abilities of these two Ijutsu bloodlines are combined, what kind of effect will be produced? A huge increase in illusion? Or will it be an increase in observation, eye power control, or yin release? The Sharingan's ultimate point is the Mangekyo Sharingan. Two pairs of Mangekyo can create the eternal Mangekyo. So what kind of sparks will the Sharingan and the Blood Dragon Eye create? Question after question popped up in Uchiha Chi's mind, prompting his thoughts to race as he began to recall what had happened to him, but soon, his face changed drastically, turning pale in an instant. As if he suddenly understood something, Uchiha Chi began to tremble all over. Cold sweat suddenly broke out in his palms, and his heart felt like thousands of ants were crawling over it, biting and piercing his heart. He remembered. The owner of the Mangekyo Eye technique currently engraved on his body was named Uchiha Setsuna. And that old man had ultimately fallen into the hands of the third Raikage. Izanagi's power was ineffective. And he had forgotten his own Mangekyo Eye technique. He had sealed the final eye technique within himself. In other words, that little old man was dead? Dead. He was dead. As soon as Uchiha Chi thought of this. Crackle, 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 his teeth chattered, his face trembled, his hands clenched into fists, his features instantly contorted. His face, at that moment, became ferocious, terrifying, filled with murderous intent and remorse. Memories of the past, along with all the ups and downs he'd experienced, suddenly flooded his mind. His nostrils and mouth felt as acrid as thick smoke, his brain swollen with blood, ready to explode. The blood vessels on his forehead bulged, connecting to his eyes. Thunder, shadow, at that moment, the brand new eyes, still unformed and uncontrollable, covered by his eyelids, turned a crimson red. The dark, square pupils, reminiscent of blood dragon eyes, gradually grew sharper. Then, fed by the natural energy of the blood vessels, they stretched vertically, transforming into vertical snake pupils. Finally, a pair of scarlet pupils, surrounded by 3 pitch-black magatama, appeared within these eyes. Boom, a gloomy, terrifying, evil, and filled with insane murderous chakra storm instantly erupted from Uchiha Chi's body, transforming into a blazing beam that shot straight into the sky. The terrifying creature hidden in these eyes was about to reveal itself. At this moment, the young man who was dragging Uchiha Chi raised an eyebrow slightly, let go of Uchiha Chi's collar, and tossed him aside. Then, amidst the raging wind, he leisurely picked up a pair of stylish square sunglasses from among the scattered objects on the street and put them on. Then, Yuashiro Yan's gaze suddenly darkened, his expression becoming equally ferocious. His gaze fell directly on Uchiha Chi's closed eyes, which were now shedding tears of regret and blood. He shouted angrily, "What, just because you put on a painful expression on your face, you think you can act like a wild dog? Who are you trying to show off to? Give it to me, give it to you, or give it to the dead, or can you stand here and chop down your enemy's house with a single blow? Enough." Yuashiro Yan suddenly raised a palm, fingers spread out, and clenched it fiercely at Uchiha Chi, who lay helpless and furious on the ground. His eyes, the whites of his eyes and pupils, dyed a crimson red. The next moment, a gigantic blood dragon rose from behind him, circling with its head held high, and swooped down towards Uchiha Chi in horror. The ground cracked, dust and smoke rose up. It actually beat Uchiha Chi to 50 meters underground. The blazing flames rising to the sky suddenly dissipated at this moment. Now, You only need to give your thoughts to the sixth-path sage and your body to me, prisoner. Chapter 272 The Third Power, Susanoo. Dust filled the air, and the already dilapidated town streets felt as if swept by a force 8 gale. Goods, crates, rotting fruit, and the dust on the ground were hurled everywhere, eventually landing like ping-pong balls. A salty, damp sea breeze rustled gently, and the sudden silence was broken by the cries of a baby girl. Miyagien's expression was stern, holding his crying daughter in one hand, staring blankly at the crater he had so casually blasted. His eyes, the whites and pupils alike, were a sea of crimson, leaving only a pair of square, pitch-black pupils, a terrifying sight. These were the eyes of Shinobi in the original novel. Only those who had endured extreme pain, such as his wife's suicide and the slaughter of his entire clan with overwhelming hatred, could wield these eyes of a higher order. Using illusions to influence the real world, they unleashed the power of Yin-Dan. Using blood as a medium, they manipulated various ninjutsu and illusions that manipulated the human body, allowing the unseen to be controlled by the caster. Furthermore, through the eye technique, blood dragon technique, he could create a massive 9-headed blood dragon, a power so terrifying it could crush any conventional ninjutsu. What an annoying little brat, waking up and making such a fuss. Miyagi-en reached out to pat his daughter's swaddling clothes, his eyes coldly looking down at the ground. Now, are you able to even begin to understand your current situation? However, at that moment, a deep, sinister chakra suddenly surged from the ground. Miyagi-en raised an eyebrow, his heart skipping a beat. The dust slowly cleared, and as he saw the shattered surface and the scene beneath, Miyagi-en couldn't help but shrink. What is that? At that moment, Uchiha Chi stood there with his eyes closed. Around him, streams of flame slowly floated and vanished. Between illusion and reality, a transparent, blazing skeleton, resembling a human rib, slowly vanished. Yet, protected by the skeleton, Uchiha Chi, despite taking such a heavy blow, remained unscathed. At this moment, subtitles flashed before his eyes. The final evolutionary direction of bloodline elimination has been selected. Complete genetic defects and trace back the original power of the bloodline, combining the incomplete Ten Tails body, the 3 Magatama Sharingan, and the Blood Dragon Eye. The talent is combined into incomplete 6th Path Sage body, S+, talent, incomplete 6th Path Sage body, combining the Sage body and the Sage Eye. You can now trace back the power of the 6th Path Sage through your bloodline. You have mastered the third power, Susanoo, S, entry level, ring-shaped skeleton. Under the influence of all martial arts mastery, your rank has been forcibly increased to proficient, half-shaped skeleton. Please note, the eyes have not yet completed their evolution and cannot be traced back further. If you do, the skill will automatically receive the critical suffix. Attention! A new eye technique seems to be brewing within your eyes. At this moment, amidst the dreary night, whipped by the increasingly rapid sea breeze, Uchiha Chi raised his hand slightly and ripped away the black cloth bound around his eyes. A flash of sinister crimson light shone. A pair of black cross-shaped, 3 Magatama Sharingan eyes, dripping with blood and tears, suddenly opened. Then, he tilted his head slightly and looked indifferently at Miyashiro-en, who had attacked him. A flash of disdain, sarcasm, and fury flashed in his eyes. You said I'm a prisoner. Uchiha Chi's eyes darkened. The next moment, flowing flames surged from behind him, combining to form a massive, dragon-like spine. From this dragon-like spine, strands of fiery bones stretched out, shoulder blades, humerus, sternum, spine, mandible, zygomatic bones, nasal bones, frontal bones, parietal bones. Each bone rapidly took shape and grew. Protecting Uchiha Chi within, a 30-meter tall half-skeletal structure instantly rose from the ground. A massive bony palm pressed against the ground, lifting Uchiha Chi from the pit. Standing in midair, he gazed down at Uchiha below. With a cold gaze, Uchiha Chi demanded, "Now, tell me who the prisoner is." A question, accompanied by a storm of sinister chakra, rose up. The skull, enveloped in blazing flames, drooped slightly. 2 golden rays, like the sun, shone from its hollow eye sockets, shooting straight at Uchiha. Miyashiro-en's pupils shrank to the size of pinpoints, and he couldn't help but take a half step back. This, compared to the behemoth before him, the blood dragon behind him seemed like a toy. This is a power that surpasses your Blood Pond clan. Only those who possess these eyes can unlock it, forcing you to submit. Uchiha Chi gazed down at him and stated calmly, "The third power, Susanoo, at this moment, Uchiha Chi, like the six-path sage 1,000 years ago, awakened this terrifying power with just the three Magatama Sharingan. By forcibly merging the Blood Dragon Eye, a similar power to the Sharingan, perhaps also derived from the six-path sage's eye technique, with the Sharingan, he reunited the incomplete Ten Tails body. This was the ultimate eye technique to achieve elimination. Hiss, Miyashiro gasped, his gaze suddenly solemn. So, the clan legend is true. With that expression, no wonder you've also awakened this forbidden power. This is the Mangekyo Sharingan, huh? Miyashiro was startled, as if remembering something. He looked at Uchiha Chi's eyes in surprise. Seeing the three jet-black Magatama swirling around the cross-shaped pupil, Miyashiro was suddenly bewildered. Wait, shouldn't this kid's eyes now be the Blood Dragon eyes he'd inserted? And, while the pattern is a little strange, that's a three Magatama Sharingan, right? It's not the Mangekyo Sharingan, is it? Meanwhile, Uchiha Chi, having regained consciousness and confirmed his internal condition, was also getting a little anxious. Damn, buddy, I've already opened my skeleton, why aren't you running? Susanoo consumes pupil energy, and overuse can cause blindness. Despite its evolution, the three Tamajo Sharingan wasn't very effective. While he could use Susanoo with a three Tamajo form like the six-path sage, that didn't mean he could keep it open for 3 days and 3 nights. While Uchiha Chi's physical condition had improved since his coma, he was still extremely weak, unable to generate much chakra. The Ten Tails and the three Tamajo form had increased his chakra limit, adding a whole new set of powerful skills to his repertoire. For a moment, Uchiha Chi felt he could easily defeat his former self. But even the best cook can't cook without the straw. In his current state, he lacked the chakra to cast ninjutsu. Uchiha Chi knew that even if he were blinded, he wouldn't be a match for an of Oshiro. After all, he had never fought in the original story. Just like Meijetsu Suzuki, a complete information black hole. Furthermore, fighting this Birdman here wouldn't be beneficial. He already had the Blood Dragon Eye, and his younger brother, Hidden, was still waiting to be rescued in the Land of Lightning. He also had to quickly send a letter to the clan to confirm whether old Uchiha Setsuna was dead or not. He had just lost his mind, but thinking back, the possibility of him being alive was quite high. Furthermore, the Uchiha clan needed him to intervene, otherwise who knew what these people would do next? Furthermore, he had to figure out how many days he had been unconscious, and what the situation was like outside. These were things Uchiha Chi needed to do immediately. He didn't have time to waste with this idiot. So, just run. Meanwhile, with a slight tingling sensation on his scalp, Miyashiro stared at Uchiha Chi for a moment, his mind racing as he pondered a strategy. Coming from the Blood Pond clan, Miyashiro knew nothing about the outside world. By dragging Uchiha Chi away, he probably wanted him to serve as a guide, gain some information about the outside world, and at the same time, satisfy his own wicked desires. But who could have imagined that a random Uchiha would actually be caught, a formidable figure capable of unleashing Susanoo. Furthermore, ninja battles are all about intelligence. He was completely bewildered by the skeleton-clad brat before him, and knew nothing about the vast majority of ninjas in the world. He wasn't afraid of a fight with a brat, but his daughter was still in his arms. What if he hurt her? Chino. He wasn't like that brat, who was encased in a skeleton. This was completely unacceptable to the daughter-obsessed Miyashiro. But surrendering to someone he considered a prisoner was a difficult proposition. Thus, both sides, driven by their own pretensions, had ultimately led to this awkward situation, a truly difficult situation. After a long moment of staring, until their eyes grew dry, the two, unable to bear it any longer, suddenly spoke in unison. Kid, make a deal. Old Bang, make a deal. Chapter 273, Defense of Daimyo. This campaign, led by the Sanin Orochimaru, resulted in the injury of the Sandame Raikage, the severe injury of the Eight-Tails Jinchuriki, the death of the Two-Tails Jinchuriki, the escape of the Two-Tails, the collapse of the Kumagakure defenses, and the leakage of a large amount of strategic information, and, on the same day, the daimyo of the Land of Lightning was assassinated again. A week later, the Sandame Raikage will travel with his son to Kumagakure Castle to apologize to the enraged daimyo. I believe this is an opportunity. In the meeting room of the Hokage's building in Konoha village, the Land of Fire, only 3 people sat in the meeting room. The man at the head of the table was middle-aged, with a donkey-like face. He wore a fan-like headdress with 3 flame patterns and held a short fan. It was nearly June, and the weather was beginning to heat up, but he was fanning himself to cool off. Seated beside him were the two most powerful men in Konoha village, Sarutobi Hiruzen, the Hokage, and Shimura Danzo, the Hokage's assistant and leader of the route. The identity of the person in the main seat was self-evident, the lord of the land of fire, the daimyo. So, Danzo, what do you intend to do? The daimyo glanced at Danzo, speaking, and asked calmly, right now, the land of lightning has suffered heavy losses. A single strike would completely silence them in the Third Shinobi World War, and that strike would involve the military expenses the daimyo of the land of lightning promised to pay to the hidden cloud village. So, your highness, I would like to issue a mission. Danzo narrowed his eyes, a cold glint flashing in them. Invite the daimyo of the land of lightning to visit our land of fire. Impossible. The daimyo of the land of fire's gaze suddenly turned cold. Although Shimura Danzo didn't directly mention his intention to take action against a daimyo of the land of lightning, targeting a daimyo, even one from an enemy nation, without threatening their life, simply inviting them to visit, was a profound disrespect to the daimyo's position. Moreover, the Fire Country daimyo clearly understood the underlying meaning. The daimyo and nobles' superiority over the far more powerful ninja lay in their control over the Fire Country's power and economy. While Danzo's actions were ostensibly motivated by war, they were actually using him to break down the barriers between the classes and weaken their authority. Hiruzen, you're lacking in discipline for your men. The Fire Country daimyo didn't even glance at Danzo, instead glancing at Sarutobi Hiruzen, who sat nearby, smoking a pipe. Danzo, don't mention this matter again. Sarutobi Hiruzen exhaled a puff of smoke, and then was about to persuade him in a roundabout way, it's just that your highness. Before he could finish, the Fire Country daimyo interrupted with a look of amazement. Huh? But speaking of which, this battle was really beautiful. This child named Uchiha Chi is really amazing. Who can fight against the three masters of Kumagakure on his own and create an opportunity for his teacher to launch a surprise attack on Kumagakure? Is he the candidate for the fourth Hokage chosen by you, Hiruzen? Sarutobi Hiruzen shook his head. The strategy of this battle was formulated by Orochimaru. As the commander-in-chief, he is the biggest contributor, and I intend to let him. Hearing this, the Fire Country daimyo sighed, folded his fan and tapped the table twice, and said, however, although Kumagakure suffered heavy losses this time, Konoha is not necessarily much better. I heard, third Hokage, your disciple Orochimaru, and your grandson Uchiha Chi, are both missing. What a shame. Such a talented master and apprentice have fallen here. Let's discuss this matter later. The Fire Country daimyo stood up and left a meeting room without saying anything more. Shimura Danzo was left staring at Sarutobi Hiruzen with a dark expression. Hiruzen, I told you a long time ago, this method is too weak, and this guy won't agree to it. If it were me, they should just send people disguised as ninjas from other countries to force the daimyo of the land of lightning to stop allocating funds for the war and completely kick Kumagakure off the table. Sarutobi Hiruzen shook his head. You still don't understand. Right now, there are too many people who want to kill the daimyo of the land of lightning. Besides, the reason why the daimyo mentioned this loss is also to imply that Kumagakure hasn't really suffered any serious damage this time. As long as they put the blame on Konoha and arouse the anger of the daimyo of the land of lightning, Kumagakure will still have the strength to fight. The daimyo won't bet on the land of fire to do such a risky thing. As the saying goes, if kings don't meet, everything can still be changed. Danzo Shimura frowned slightly and couldn't help but ask, what exactly do you want to do? Sarutobi Hiruzen snorted and chuckled while holding his pipe. Of course, he wouldn't tell Danzo that he did this just to put some pressure on his highness and find out what he thought. As for the situation on the other side of the lightning country, I've said that at this point, there are many people who want to throw dirty water on Konoha, and it's still unknown where the remaining firepower of Kumagakure will be directed, so, the daimyo of the lightning country cannot die, at least, before he accepts the apology from the third Hokage. We have to protect him instead. As he spoke, Sarutobi Hiruzen narrowed his eyes slightly, recalling the top-secret intelligence sent back by Orochimaru the day before, and the crazy plan that Kumagakure had originally planned. It's simply incomprehensible. Shimura Danzo's face darkened, and he stared at Sarutobi Hiruzen dimly. He knew what the monkey was going to do when he saw the monkey lift his leg. Seeing Hiruzen's expression, how could he not know? This guy must be hiding something from him. Bang! His face darkening, Danzo snorted coldly, turned, slammed the door, and left, leaving behind a single sentence. Hiruzen, You'll regret this. After leaving the Hokage's office, Danzo hurried to the south side of the Hokage building without stopping. He didn't know what Monkey was planning, but he knew that Uchiha Chi and Orochimaru were his subordinates, and the credit for this great victory belonged to him. The Fire Country Daimyo and Sarutobi Hiruzen were in the same boat. Today, Monkey had asked him to clash with the Daimyo, which he saw as a clear attempt to push him out of the game and pave the way for his disciple. Because this achievement was so immense. The achievements made by Uchiha Chi and Orochimaru, master and disciple, were so significant that they could even change the entire landscape of the Third Shinobi World War. The complete leak of crucial information about Kumaгаkure's strategic defenses, outposts, camps, and offensive plans meant that Konoha could easily pin Kumagakure down in the direction of the Land of Rice with a smaller force. With the Blood Pond clan wiped out, Kumagakure's plan for a surprise attack across Hell Valley was completely thwarted. This effectively blocked the two northern breaches of the Land of Rice and the Land of Hot Springs. If Kumagakure wanted to invade, it would have to cross another country, the Land of Iron. However, as a neutral nation, the Land of Iron held special significance as a stop to the war. If they could take a further step and convince the daimyo of the Land of Lightning to refuse funding to Kumagakure, they could completely eliminate the threat from the north. That would mean that Danzo's route had accomplished the feat of defeating a major ninja nation with a single Anbu-affiliated organization. Such achievements might well earn him a glimpse of the Hokage position. Thinking of this, Danzo's eyes darkened. Daimyo, what a thing, dare to stand in my way. Even if you're the son of heaven, you must die. It was unclear whether he was thinking of the daimyo of the Land of Lightning or the daimyo of the Land of Fire. As his thoughts shifted, Danzo, walking swiftly, arrived before a gate emblazoned with two red and white round fans. He raised his hand and knocked 3 times. This was the residence of the chief of police of the Uchiha clan, Konoha's most powerful family. Meanwhile, Namikaze Minato and Uchiha Fugaku, the two people Danzo wanted to see, were both inside. Chapter 274. We are short of a guide. Hey, isn't he here? I'm heading to Yunming City to assassinate the daimyo of the Land of Thunder. A blazing bonfire illuminated the devastated surroundings of the Frost Country town. The night wind blew gently through the deserted huts, emitting a whimpering sound. The two men, each with their magical powers retracted, sat silently around the campfire. From the other's eyes and the young girl they carried, Uchiha Chi recognized the person confronting him as none other than the hidden boss, Miyashiro En, who had massacred the Blood Pond clan in the original novel. At this time, placing his already sleeping daughter on a cushion made of carefully folded worn-out clothes, Miyashiro En was silent for a moment, then said hoarsely, 3 months ago, my wife was chosen by the clan to go to the daimyo's mansion in the Land of Lightning to submit a confession. Because my wife is very beautiful, she has a pair of purple eyes, like the most gorgeous gems in the world. Anyone who has seen her will be intoxicated by her beauty. Listening to Miyashiro En telling her story, for no reason, Uchiha Chi vaguely recalled a pair of clear green eyes, which fit Miyashiro En's description very well, like gems, like a sea of clouds flowing in the sky, and like a lake wrinkled by the breeze in the sun, sparkling and shining, full of affection. He couldn't help but curl the corners of his mouth slightly. And Miyashiro En was silent for a long while, and then he said with a dull and wooden expression, but she was pregnant with my daughter at the time. Then, she was chosen by the clan to go to the Land of Lightning to meet the daimyo. I know what they want her to do. I can't refuse, nor can I resist, because I am the young patriarch of this clan. Only by letting my woman serve the daimyo can it be called true submission. Instead, my wife smiled and comforted me and said, look, Miyashiro, we will be free soon. Then, we will build a big castle for our daughter together and build it in my name. Then, the whole family will live happily together for the rest of our lives. At this point, Miyashiro En couldn't help laughing. His face was hideous, and the skin on his face began to distort with laughter. But, I have to say, the ninjas of the Hidden Cloud Village really did a great thing. They intercepted and killed the daimyo's repatriated envoy. My wife's sacrifice was in vain, and shortly after returning to the clan, she chose to commit suicide. It was also on that day that I obtained these eyes that surpassed all the members of the tribe. It was also on that day, when I wanted to slaughter all the people in that tribe, the son of the Hokage came, with his so-called Brotherhood Covenant. At this moment, the expression on Miyashiro En's face froze into ice, frighteningly cold. This world is made up of deceptions. My tribe deceived my wife deceived me. and the son of the Rakage deceived my stupid tribesmen. Everyone lives in lies and comforts themselves that tomorrow will be better. Those who stand at the top, those who stand high, enjoy everything calmly, and only I." Miyashiro gnashed his teeth, his eyes flashing with uncontrollable rage. "With these eyes, in the tears of regret that my wife suffered until her death, I saw the truth." Uchiha tried to put himself in his shoes, but soon he couldn't help but shrink his neck. Despite his understanding of the dark side of the ninja world and his anticipation for what happened to Miyashiro, hearing the victim's tragic story still sent a chill down his spine. He was silent for a moment, and as the victim began to recount his story, he finally understood what had happened to him. After falling unconscious from the cliff that day, it was Miyashiro who took him away and gave him a pair of blood dragon eyes. It was thanks to Uchiha's robust body that his heart, eyes, and other parts of his body supported various types of ports, allowing him to easily swap between them and the ninja world. Anyone else who tried to do the same would have likely collapsed. However, this also led to a series of coincidences, allowing him to awaken a technique that should have been used with a Mangekyou Sharingan, Susanoo. This was exactly what Uchiha couldn't understand. After all, it was he who owed a favor to Yashiro. So, Uchiha raised his head and looked at Yashiro and asked, "Then, why did you save me? You slaughtered an entire clan, but saved an Uchiha who had imprisoned you for more than 20 years. I'm sorry, I can't understand this. You could have killed me." Yashiro did not answer this question, nor did he bother to explain to the kid in front of him why he was soft-hearted at that moment. He just raised his head and said lightly, "The battle that took place above Hell Valley was only supported by the Cloud Village that the son of the Rakage and the Blood Pond clan had agreed upon. If I'm not mistaken, you should have been attacked by the Cloud Village ninja and fell off the cliff, so we have the same enemy, and it just so happens that I need a guide. I have never left Hell Valley since I was born. I need you to understand the situation in the outside world, and you will take me to the capital of the Land of Lightning, Yunming City." Hearing this, Uchiha cheered up and didn't care about the clumsy words in Yashiro's words, because Yunming City was exactly where he was going. The evil god cultists who had lost their minds due to Fiden's Puit were now gathered in the capital of the Land of Lightning. The little brother's situation was probably not very good. At the critical moment, it was still up to the eldest brother to bring justice. "Anyway, thank you," he nodded, then raised his head and glanced at Yashiro. "I am a person who distinguishes between gratitude and resentment. Since I have accepted your favor, then whether you want to kill the daimyo of the Land of Lightning, kill the third Rakage, or demolish the capital of the Land of Lightning, it doesn't matter. I can help you. I'm not very good at other things, but if it's a fight with Kumagakure, I will accompany you to the end." Uchiha immediately patted his chest, raised the corners of his mouth and grinned. Uchiha couldn't help but glance at Uchiha in surprise. This kid had been as stubborn as a bull just now, so why was he so easy to talk to now? He hadn't even mentioned the deal or the chips he could pay Uchiha, but the kid had already taken advantage of the situation and agreed to it. Why does this kid smell so good at the same time? At this moment, Uchiha touched his shrunken belly, feeling the intense hunger radiating from his entire body at a cellular level. He wished he could fly to Yunming City and fuck 10 cows to replenish his chakra. Then, he glanced at Miyashiro and asked in surprise, "Now that the misunderstanding is resolved, then what are you waiting for? Lead the way, let's go. Let's go do something big." Hearing this, Miyashiro looked at Uchiha in astonishment and asked in shock, "I asked you to be my guide, and you asked me to lead the way." Uchiha was also stunned when he heard this. "But the point is, you asked me. I can't even find the way." God, he had only been in this ninja world for a little over a year. Apart from Konoha village, which he was slightly familiar with due to running missions around the village, he was completely confused about the rest of the ninja world. So, the two of them, who were just about to set off, sat down again and fell into silence. Miyashiro couldn't help but cover his face, a headache. He had just wanted to find someone to show him the way, but how could he find someone like this? So, were we both directionally challenged? Gazing at the flickering bonfire before him, Uchiha rested his chin on his hand and spoke gravely, "I think we need a guide." Hearing this, Miyagi looked around at the devastated Frost Country town, devastated by the war, leaving not even a single human being, and fell into deep thought. "This is so desolate, not even bandits want to stay. Where are we going to find anyone?" Suddenly, a rustling sound of footsteps echoed from the end of the dilapidated street. Hey, here they come. Their eyes lit up, and they simultaneously looked up, gazing towards the source of the footsteps. At the end of the street, a young man in a black robe and short red hair slowly approached, gazing at them with the same surprise. Great! In this desolate wilderness, I've actually come across two collectors with impressive chakra fluctuations. Scorpion's eyes lit up. Without hesitation, he unsheathed the pistol hidden beneath his black robe, snaking from his waistband. He strode forward. Faced with his groundbreaking weapon, these two mortal ninjas wouldn't be able to withstand even a single blow from him. Chapter 275 Scorpion, Kid, times have changed. Not to mention the two who seemed to see Scorpion as if they had found a guiding light. Scorpion was also beaming with excitement. Ever since he'd followed Kokuzu's footsteps and set out for the land of lightning, he'd realized he was lost. This was understandable. After all, before poisoning the third Kazekage, Scorpion, a puppeteer residing in Tsunagakure, diligently researching new techniques, had rarely left the land of wind. After defeating the third Kazekage, he'd mostly been lingering around the sand country. Traveling so far to kill someone was, quite frankly, a new experience for Scorpion. Consequently, not long after leaving the Frost Country for the Gold Palace, he realized he'd lost track of Kokuzu, the man he'd intended to kill. He then began to regret sending the ninja, who was using his subconscious to manipulate sand, away. He should have at least asked him about the road conditions beforehand. Fortunately, unlike the two brothers who sat there staring blankly, Scorpion had a map. Following it, although he strayed from the main road, he was generally on the right track and soon arrived at the dilapidated town on the side of the Frost Thunder Trail. However, just as Scorpion was about to adjust his course and continue around the town, a violent chakra surge suddenly erupted from the center, and a beam of blazing fire shot high into the sky. The quality of this chakra, the hidden power it contained, surpassed most of his collection, even rivaling the top secret item in the second scroll strapped to his waist. He glanced sideways, instantly recognizing this as the undisputed #1 ninja world's foremost fire-style master. Then, to Scorpion's surprise, a second chilling chakra aura rose, and a fierce battle erupted in the center of the town. Scorpion's heart suddenly pounded, and he knew it was a thrilling feeling. Without hesitation, he rushed in the direction of the raging battle. Now, the two sides met. Such a pleasant surprise. Scorpion smiled as he gazed at the two men across from him, their expressions odd. One was a young man dressed in retro clothes, looking like he'd stepped out of a Warring States film set a century ago, wearing stylish sunglasses. The other was a black-haired, blind imp, seemingly a few years younger, equally handsome, yet covered with a black cloth. Scorpion's gaze shifted, and he immediately made a judgment. Without hesitation, he drew his pistol with his left hand, leaned forward, and strode forward at full speed. With his other hand, he swung a long, straight iron rod from his sleeve, raised his gun with one hand, and aimed it at Miyashiro-en. The taller one looked a bit more difficult, so he'd take him down first. As for the imp, he'd poison him and torture him for information before finishing him off. Swish! The wind whipped up by his charge ruffled Scorpion's short red hair, and his eyes lit up with a ruthless murderous intent. At this moment, Miyashiro was momentarily stunned, watching the guy charging at him with an eager, thirsty attitude, as if he wanted to kill him. His gaze caught the iron spike, and he froze, about to duck to the side. At the same moment, his blood dragon eyes quietly lit up. The moment his gaze met with the Scorpion before him, the illusion of blood dragon eyes was instantly activated. However, the pupil technique passed straight through the Scorpion. The Scorpion, having locked eyes with Miyashiro, showed no sign of being controlled and continued charging towards him. What's going on? Miyashiro was startled. Illusions don't work on him. At this moment, Uchiha Chi suddenly exclaimed, "Holy shit! This guy has a gun." Then, with a look of surprise on his face, Uchiha Chi warned, "Hey, Miyashiro, watch out for the weapon in that guy's left hand, also, watch out for those strings." Miyashiro was momentarily stunned. A gun? Strings? What the hell is this? Just as he was about to ask, bang! A gunshot rang out. A light bullet, too fast for the human eye to detect, shot straight at Uchiha-en. However, the blood dragon eye was clearly not ordinary. Before the gunshot, Uchiha had noticed the strange weapon, reminded by Uchiha Chi. Moreover, the speed of the Scorpion handgun's light bullet was still something that the blood dragon eye could detect. At this moment, Uchiha dodged the light bullet with a sideways leap. At the same time, responding to Uchiha Chi's warning, his eyes fell on the illusory silk threads behind the red-haired boy, which were almost invisible without careful observation. He immediately raised both hands and formed a Ren seal. Water style, water shot. He gripped his left wrist, opened his right palm, and a barrage of water bullets erupted. They pierced the red-haired boy's body, severing the silk threads behind him. The threads severed, and the red-haired boy, who had been charging towards Miyashiro-en, froze in his tracks before disintegrating into a pool of sand. With a snap, the finely crafted hand cannon and the sand fell to the ground. Is this chakra thread? And a sand clone? Is this brat using the puppetry of the salmon family? Miyashiro-en's heart trembled slightly. He finally understood why the illusion had failed. The red-haired boy before him wasn't his true form at all, but a sand clone controlled by chakra threads. His true form was hidden, and the sand clone's movements were controlled by chakra threads, avoiding the massive chakra consumption required by traditional sand clones. He also used this weapon, which fired at a higher rate of fire and could attack without seals and with surprising surprise. The ninja who launched the surprise attack was incredibly cunning, cautious, and a master of combat. Miyashiro-en suddenly felt like cursing. They, the Blood Pond, had been imprisoned in Hell Valley for a century, never leaving. Had the ninja outsiders become so cunning? Then, where was his true form? While Miyashiro-en was feeling a headache, Scorpion's true form, lurking in the shadows, couldn't help but frown. Those eyes beneath those sunglasses are a bloodline of unseen eye techniques. They could actually detect the trajectory of a light bullet. This guy's a bit tricky. Besides, he's clearly not familiar with my tactics. It was only with another brat's warning that he dodged the third round of the tactical fire. With this thought, Scorpion's gaze fell on Uchiha Chi, who was running towards him, bending down in amazement to pick up his pistol. Then I'll finish you off first. Without hesitation, Scorpion used the earth escape, fish reflection technique to stealthily and swiftly approach Uchiha Chi from underground. When the two sides were within 7 steps of each other. Now, Scorpion leaped out without hesitation, leaping into the air, pulling out 2 pistols from his waist with both hands, aiming them at Uchiha Chi's forehead. Even if you have the eye technique bloodline to see the trajectory clearly, at such a close distance, this will be an attack that cannot be dodged no matter what. Scorpion's gaze instantly fell on Uchiha Chi's eyes covered with the black cloth, revealing a sneer, not to mention, a blind kid like you. Bang! Bang! In an instant, 2 violent gunshots exploded. Kid, times have changed. End of this chapter. Thank you so much for reading until the end. Don't forget to give it a like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription or donation encourages us to continue. Thank you all. See you in the next video.